You're nothing but a mistake that should have been erased 22 years ago. Elena Carter froze in the doorway.
All she inherited
Her
was a
hand gripped
farm
the manila
key.
envelope so hard it crumpled. 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and now this. Mrs. Patterson finally looked up from her desk and smiled. Your mother was insane. Your grandmother died alone like a dog. And you, she stood slowly, you're going to end up exactly the same, another Carter woman destroying herself. How do you know about my family? Oh, honey. Mrs. Patterson pulled a photograph from her drawer. A woman who looked exactly like Elena standing in front of a white farmhouse. I've known who you are since the day you walked through my door. I've spent 3 years making sure you never found out. Elena's baby kicked hard. Why? Because your grandmother destroyed my father, and I swore I'd destroy everything she loved in return. Before we continue Elena's desperate journey, subscribe to this channel and follow her story to the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far Elena's search for home reaches across the world. Now let's discover what Mrs. Patterson has been hiding for 22 years and why she's so afraid of Elena finding that farm. Elena's legs almost gave out. 22 years. She had spent 22 years believing she was nobody, and this woman had known the truth the entire time. You're lying, Elena whispered. Am I? Mrs. Patterson held up the photograph. This is Caroline Carter, your mother, taken 1 month before she gave birth to you and completely lost her mind. Elena reached for it. Mrs. Patterson pulled it back. Give me that. No, this stays with me, just like everything else about your pathetic family. I have a right to know where I came from. Mrs. Patterson laughed. It was cold, cruel. Rights? You have no rights. You're a foster kid, a number in a file. You're nothing. Elena's hands shook. Her baby kicked again harder this time. Why? She demanded. Why would you do this? Mrs. Patterson walked around her desk. She stopped close enough that Elena could smell her perfume. Something expensive. Something wrong. Your grandmother, Mrs. Patterson said quietly, was a monster wrapped in charity work. Margaret Carter. Everyone called her Saint Maggie, the woman who helped everyone, who donated to every cause, who acted like God himself had appointed her to save Monroe County. I don't understand what that has to do with me. Everything. Mrs. Patterson's eyes burned. My father worked for your grandmother for 15 years. He managed her orchards, maintained her equipment, did everything she asked whenever she asked, and when he got cancer, when he needed help paying for treatment, she fired him. Elena shook her head. That doesn't... She threw him out like garbage. Mrs. Patterson's composure cracked. Said she couldn't afford to keep paying someone who couldn't work. He lost his job, lost our house, lost his dignity. He died 6 months later in a charity hospital begging for pain medication they wouldn't give him. I'm sorry for what happened to your father, but that wasn't my fault. I wasn't even born. No, but you're her blood. Mrs. Patterson leaned closer. When your file crossed my desk 3 years ago and I saw the name Caroline Carter, I thought I was dreaming. The granddaughter of the woman who destroyed my family right there in my system. Alone. Vulnerable. Completely unaware of who she was. Elena's stomach turned. What did you do? I made sure you stayed lost. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Every time someone tried to trace your family history, I buried it. Every time a social worker got curious, I transferred you somewhere new. And when your grandmother hired lawyers to find you... Elena's heart stopped. She looked for me. For years, spent a fortune on private investigators and legal fees. She was desperate to find you. Mrs. Patterson's smile widened. And I made sure she never did. I kept you from her and her from you, and she died without ever knowing where you were. The room spun. Elena grabbed the doorframe. Her grandmother had searched for her, had wanted her, had tried to find her, and this woman had stolen that. You had no right, Elena breathed. I had every right. She took my father from me. I took you from her. We're even. Something shifted inside Elena. The fear and confusion crystallized into something harder. Colder. Where is this farm? Mrs. Patterson blinked. What? The farm in the photograph. Where is it? Why would I tell you that? Because if you don't, I'll go to the police. I'll tell them everything you just admitted. Obstruction, falsifying records, conspiracy to... You have no proof. Mrs. Patterson's voice was ice. It's your word against mine. A homeless pregnant teenager versus a respected facility director with 30 years of service. She was right. Elena had nothing, but she had something else. Determination. "I'm leaving," Elena said, "and I will find that farm, with or without your help." She turned toward the door. "Elena?" She stopped, but didn't turn around. "If you walk out that door, I'll make one phone call. I have contacts in every child services office from here to the East Coast. The moment you try to access any government assistance, apply for any benefits, ask anyone for help, I'll know, and I'll make sure your baby is taken from you before you ever hold her." Elena's blood went cold. "You can't do that." "Try me." Elena stood there frozen between the door and the woman who had controlled her entire life. Her baby kicked, once, twice, as if urging her to move. She ran. Selena burst through the front doors of Meadowbrook and kept running until her lungs burned and her back screamed. She made it 3 blocks before she had to stop, doubled over against a bus stop sign, gasping for air. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. "That was foolish." Mrs. Patterson's voice was calm now, almost pleasant. "Running won't help you, Elena. I meant what I said. One phone call, and your baby belongs to the state. Leave me alone. Turn around. Come back. We can forget this whole conversation happened." "No." "Elena, be reasonable. You have no money, no family, no one who cares whether you live or die. What exactly do you think you're going to do?" Elena looked down at the envelope still clutched in her hand. She hadn't let go of it through everything. Her documents, her history, whatever scraps of truth Mrs. Patterson hadn't managed to destroy. "I'm going to find my grandmother's farm," Elena said, "and I'm going to claim what she left me." Mrs. Patterson laughed. "She didn't leave you anything. The farm was sold years ago. There's nothing there." "Then why are you so afraid of me going?" Silence. "Goodbye, Mrs. Patterson." "Elena, if you hang up this phone." Elena ended the call. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone, but she forced herself to focus. She had to move, had to get somewhere safe before Mrs. Patterson could follow through on her threats. She opened the envelope. Her fingers found the usual paperwork first. Birth certificate, medical records, report cards, nothing useful. Then at the very bottom, her fingers touched something different. A smaller envelope, cream-colored and old. Her name was written on the front. Just Elena. In handwriting that looked careful, deliberate, old. Inside were 2 items. A photograph of an elderly woman standing in front of a white farmhouse. On the back, for Elena when she's grown. "The farm remembers even if the world forgets. Come home, MC." And a key. Old brass with a leather tag that read Harmony Fields. Elena stared at the key. Her grandmother had left this for her. Had hidden it in her file, hoping she would find it someday. Come home. She had a home. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She rejected the call. It buzzed again, and again. Mrs. Patterson wasn't giving up. Elena powered off the phone and started walking toward the nearest bus stop. She needed to get downtown, needed to figure out where Harmony Fields was and how to get there. But first, she needed money. She had $47. Not enough for a bus ticket to Tennessee, not enough for food and lodging along the way. Not enough for anything. The public library was 6 blocks away. Elena walked as fast as her pregnant body would allow, checking over her shoulder every few seconds. She felt watched. Hunted. Even though she knew Mrs. Patterson was still at Meadowbrook, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her. The library was warm and quiet. Elena found a computer in the back corner and typed Harmony Fields Farm, Tennessee into the search bar. The results loaded slowly. A newspaper article from 2019, Margaret Maggie Carter, 86, passed away at her home at Harmony Fields Farm. She is preceded in death by her husband James and her daughter Caroline. The Carter family has operated Harmony Fields since 1923. Mrs. Carter's estate remains in legal limbo as no heirs have come forward. No heirs have come forward, because the only heir hadn't known she existed. Elena kept searching. She found more details. Harmony Fields was in Monroe County near a town called Sweetwater. 200 acres of apple orchards, a farmhouse built in the 1920s, property value estimated at over $1 million. $1 million. And it was supposed to be hers. "Can I help you with something?" Elena jumped. A woman in her 60s stood beside her, kind-faced with reading glasses perched on her nose. Her name tag read Barbara. "I'm sorry," Elena said automatically. "I was just looking up Harmony Fields." Barbara glanced at the screen. "Are you connected to the Carter family?" Elena hesitated. Trust no one her years in foster care had taught her. Everyone wants something, but Barbara's eyes were kind, and Elena was desperate. I think so, she admitted. I think Margaret Carter might have been my grandmother. I just found out today. Barbara's expression shifted. Surprise. Then something else. Recognition. May I? She gestured at the chair next to Elena. Elena nodded, confused. Barbara sat down slowly. I knew Maggie Carter. Not well, but enough. She used to come to Portland once a year. Said she was looking for someone. Barbara paused. A granddaughter she'd lost. Elena's throat tightened. She came here to Portland. Every spring for almost 15 years. She'd visit the foster care offices, the group homes, anywhere she thought her granddaughter might be. Barbara's voice softened. She never found her, but she never stopped looking. Tears burned Elena's eyes. She blinked them back. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't she find me? I don't know, honey, but I do know this. Barbara reached out and touched Elena's hand briefly. That woman loved you. She loved you before she ever met you, and she spent the last years of her life trying to bring you home. Elena couldn't speak. The tears she'd been fighting spilled over. I need to get there, she finally managed. To the farm, but I don't have enough money for a bus ticket. Barbara was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her purse. What are you doing? What Maggie would have wanted someone to do. Barbara pulled out several bills. This should cover your fare to Knoxville. From there, you'll have to figure out the rest. But at least you'll be close. I can't take your money. You're not taking it. I'm giving it. Barbara pressed the bills into Elena's hand. My son was in foster care before we adopted him. I know what it's like to be young and alone, and I know what it means to finally find where you belong. Elena stared at the money. $80. More than enough for a ticket. Thank you, she whispered. I'll pay you back, I promise. Find your grandmother's farm. That's all the payment I need. Elena bought her ticket at the Greyhound station downtown, Portland to Knoxville, departing at 8:47 p.m., 29 hours of travel, one transfer in Denver. As she waited in the station, her phone buzzed. She turned it back on to check the bus schedule. Mistake. Unknown number. She answered. You bought a bus ticket to Knoxville. Mrs. Patterson's voice was flat. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? How? I told you, I have contacts everywhere. The ticket agent at the Greyhound station owes me a favor. A pause. Turn around now, Elena. This is your last warning. Or what? Or I make the call. Your baby becomes a ward of the state the moment she's born. You'll never hold her, never name her, never know what happens to her. Elena's free hand went to her belly. Her daughter was moving, restless, as if she could sense her mother's fear. You can't do this. I've already started. There's a file on my desk right now. Allegations of drug use, mental instability, inability to provide safe housing. All it takes is one phone call to CPS in whatever state you end up in, and they'll be waiting at the hospital when you give birth. Elena's vision blurred. Why? She demanded. Why do you hate me so much? I never did anything to you. You exist. Mrs. Patterson's voice was cold. You're the last piece of Margaret Carter's legacy, and I will not let her win, not even from the grave. The line went dead. Elena stood there shaking, surrounded by strangers who had no idea that her entire world was crumbling. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw her phone against the wall, wanted to curl up and disappear. But her baby kicked. Once, twice, 3 times. And Elena remembered what the woman on the library computer had said. Maggie Carter had come to Portland every year for 15 years looking for her, had never given up, had spent her last years trying to bring her granddaughter home. If her grandmother could fight for that long, Elena could fight too. She boarded the bus at 8:47 p.m. The journey was brutal. Elena's back ached constantly. Her feet swelled until her shoes felt like torture devices. She had to use the cramped bus bathroom every hour, squeezing past irritated passengers who looked at her pregnant belly with either pity or judgment. At the Denver transfer station, she saw him. A man in a gray suit standing near the ticket counter showing something to the agent. A photograph. Elena ducked behind a pillar, her heart hammering. She couldn't see the photo from this distance, but she didn't need to. She knew. Mrs. Patterson had sent someone. The man scanned the station. His eyes passed over Elena's hiding spot without stopping. But he wasn't leaving. He was waiting. Elena's bus to Knoxville was boarding in 15 minutes. She had to get past him somehow. First time traveling alone. Elena jumped. An elderly black woman had appeared beside her, pulling a small rolling suitcase. I'm Dorothy, bum, the woman said. Couldn't help noticing you've been hiding behind this pillar for 5 minutes. Everything okay? Elena glanced at the man in gray. He was still watching the crowd. There's someone looking for me, she admitted. Someone I don't want to find me. Dorothy followed her gaze. Her eyes narrowed. That man in the suit, he was asking about a pregnant girl traveling alone. Elena's blood went cold. What did you tell him? Nothing. Told him I hadn't seen anyone matching that description. Dorothy's voice hardened. I don't help men who hunt pregnant women. Whatever trouble you're in, honey, I've seen worse. Come with me. Before Elena could respond, Dorothy took her arm and steered her toward a group of passengers heading to the boarding area. She positioned her suitcase to block Elena from view and walked with her like they were old friends. Keep your head down, don't look at him. They passed within 10 feet of the man in gray. Elena could feel his eyes scanning the crowd, searching. She didn't breathe until they reached the bus. Thank you, she gasped once they were safely inside. I don't know what I would have done. Dorothy patted her hand. You would have figured it out. Women like us always do. She settled into the seat beside Elena. Now you want to tell me why a man in a fancy suit is chasing a pregnant girl across the country? Elena hesitated, but Dorothy had just saved her. She deserved some truth. I found out today that I have family, a grandmother who died 5 years ago and left me a farm in Tennessee. The woman who ran my group home has been hiding it from me my whole life, and now she's trying to stop me from claiming it. Dorothy listened without interrupting. Why would she do that? She says my grandmother hurt her father, fired him when he was sick. She's been punishing me for it. For something your grandmother did before you were born? Yes. Dorothy shook her head slowly. That's not justice. That's poison. Hate like that doesn't hurt the people it's aimed at. It just eats up the person carrying it. She was quiet for a moment. What's on this farm of yours? I don't know. An apple orchard, a house, whatever my grandmother left behind. And you're going to claim it, pregnant alone with that man hunting you. Elena's hand went to the key in her pocket. Her grandmother's key. Yes. Dorothy smiled. It transformed her face. Good. That's exactly what your grandmother would want. She reached into her bag and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. Here. You need to eat, and then you need to rest. We've got a long way to go, and you're going to need your strength for what's coming. Elena slept fitfully, waking every few hours when her baby kicked or the bus hit a bump. At each rest stop, she checked for the man in gray. She never saw him again. Maybe Dorothy had thrown him off the trail. Maybe he'd given up. Or maybe he was ahead of her waiting in Knoxville. She couldn't know. She could only keep moving. 31 hours after leaving Portland, the bus pulled into Knoxville. Dorothy had gotten off in Oklahoma to visit her grandchildren, but she'd pressed her phone number into Elena's hand before leaving. Call me when you get settled. I want to know how this story ends. Elena stepped off the bus into the Tennessee morning, exhausted and disoriented. Her back was screaming. Her feet were so swollen she could barely walk, and she had $4 left. But she was here, 60 miles from Harmony Fields. She found a bench outside the station and sat down heavily, trying to think. She couldn't afford another bus, couldn't afford a taxi, couldn't walk 60 miles pregnant. You look like you need help. Elena looked up. A woman about 40 stood there, auburn hair pulled back, wearing scrubs decorated with cartoon characters. A nurse, maybe. Her name tag read Grace Sullivan. I'm fine, Elena said automatically. Grace sat down beside her. I'm a pediatric nurse. I've been doing this for 15 years. I know what fine looks like, and you're not it. Elena didn't have the energy to argue. I'm trying to get to Sweetwater, she admitted. There's a farm there that belonged to my grandmother. I have a key and that's it. No money, no one waiting for me. Grace's expression sharpened. What farm? Harmony Fields. Something flickered across Grace's face. Recognition and something else. Wariness. Harmony Fields, the Carter place. You know it. Everyone around here knows of it. The Carter family has been in Monroe County for 100 years. Grace paused. Maggie Carter died about 5 years ago. The place has been empty ever since. She was my grandmother. I just found out. Grace studied Elena's face for a long moment. You've got the Carter eyes, she said finally. Light brown, almost gold. Maggie had eyes just like that. Elena's chest tightened. She had her grandmother's eyes. I need to get to that farm, she said. I need to find out what she left me, but I don't have any way to get there. Grace was quiet, thinking. Then she pulled out her phone. I'm going to make some calls, and then I'm going to take you home with me for the night. You need food and rest before you go any further. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Grace smiled slightly. Because someone helped me once when I had nothing, and because that baby you're carrying deserves a chance to be born somewhere safe. She made 3 phone calls in quick succession. Elena caught fragments, something about the county clerk, something about a lawyer named Harold Bennett, something about her sister Linda. When Grace hung up, her expression was troubled. "What is it?" Elena asked. "I found out some things about your grandmother's estate." Grace hesitated. "There's a lawyer in Sweetwater who handled all of Maggie's affairs. He might have information about what she left you, but there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" 3 weeks ago, someone else filed a claim on Harmony Fields." Elena's heart stopped. "What?" "A man named Richard Donnelly. He claims to be Maggie Carter's nephew. He has documents saying he's the rightful heir to the property." "That's impossible. My grandmother didn't have any siblings. There is no nephew." "The documents look legitimate. He's already hired a lawyer to contest any other claims." Grace met Elena's eyes. "Elena, if you're really Maggie's granddaughter, you need to prove it. Fast, before this man takes everything." Elena felt the ground shifting beneath her. She'd thought Mrs. Patterson was her only enemy, but there was someone else now. Someone with lawyers and documents and a 3-week head start. "How long do I have?" "The court hearing is in 8 days. If you can't prove your identity before, then Richard Donnelly gets the farm." 8 days. Elena had 8 days to travel 60 miles, find a lawyer she'd never met, prove she was who she said she was, and fight a man who'd been preparing for this for weeks. Impossible odds, but she'd faced impossible odds her whole life. "Take me to Sweetwater," Elena said. "Now." Grace shook her head. "It's already evening. The lawyer's office will be closed, and you're exhausted. I can see you're barely standing." "I don't have time to rest." "You don't have the strength to keep going either. One night of sleep, a real meal, and we'll leave at first light. My sister Linda can drive us to Sweetwater tomorrow morning." Elena wanted to argue. Every minute she wasted was a minute Richard Donnelly could use against her, but her body was screaming for rest, and her baby had gone still in a way that worried her. "Fine, one night." Grace's apartment was small and warm. She made Elena eat a full meal, the first real food she'd had in days, and then showed her to a spare bedroom with clean sheets and a soft bed. "Get some sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." But Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, one hand on her belly, staring at the ceiling. Who was Richard Donnelly? Where had he come from? If her grandmother had no siblings, how could he possibly be her nephew, unless he was lying? Elena sat up and reached for her phone. She'd kept it off since Denver afraid Mrs. Patterson was tracking her. But she needed information. She powered it on. 17 missed calls from unknown numbers, 8 voicemails. She ignored them and opened the browser. Richard Donnelly, Monroe County, Tennessee. The results loaded slowly, and then Elena saw something that made her blood run cold. A photograph of Richard Donnelly from a local business journal article. He was a real estate developer from Atlanta, specializing in rural property acquisition and development. She kept reading. The article mentioned his recent projects. A 100-acre farm in Georgia bought from an elderly widow and converted into a luxury housing development. A family orchard in Alabama purchased through estate dispute resolution and sold to a commercial farming company. He didn't want Harmony Fields because of any family connection. He wanted to tear it apart and sell it for profit. And then she saw it. A quote from Richard Donnelly about his consulting relationship with various child welfare agencies across the Southeast. Child welfare agencies. Mrs. Patterson. Elena's hands shook as she put the pieces together. This wasn't just about Mrs. Patterson's revenge. This was bigger. Donnelly was working with her. Maybe had been working with her for years. Keeping Elena hidden so he could swoop in and claim Harmony Fields when Maggie died. They'd planned this, all of it, and now Elena had 8 days to stop them. She had to warn Grace. Had to call that lawyer, Harold Bennett. Had to do something. Her phone rang. Unknown number, Elena answered. "Did you figure it out yet?" Mrs. Patterson's voice was almost cheerful. "About Richard, about the farm. You're working with him. You've been working with him all along. Richard and I have an arrangement. He gets the property. I get the satisfaction of watching Margaret Carter's legacy destroyed. Everyone wins, except me." "You were never going to win, Elena. You're a foster kid with nothing. No proof of identity, no legal standing, no money for lawyers. Richard has all 3. I have the key. I have the photograph my grandmother left me. A key and a photograph won't hold up in court, but nice try." Elena's grip tightened on the phone. "Why are you calling me?" "To offer you a deal. Walk away now and I'll leave you alone. You can have your baby in peace, find some minimum wage job, live your sad little life. Keep fighting and I'll make sure you lose everything. Including my daughter. Especially your daughter. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about her grandmother searching for her every year for 15 years. About her mother wherever she was, whatever had happened to her. About the farm waiting in Tennessee, the only real connection she'd ever have to the family she'd never known. And she thought about her daughter kicking inside her, counting on Elena to fight. No deal, Elena said. Elena, I'm going to find that farm. I'm going to prove who I am. And I'm going to make sure you and Richard Donnelly don't get a single acre of my grandmother's land. Silence on the line. Then Mrs. Patterson laughed softly. You really are a Carter woman. Stubborn until the end. Her voice hardened. Fine. But remember, I warned you. Whatever happens next is on your head. The line went dead. Elena sat in the darkness, her heart pounding, her baby stirring restlessly. 8 days. 60 miles. 2 enemies who'd been planning her destruction for years. And somewhere at the end of it, a farm that remembered her even if the world had tried to forget. She would not let them win. She would find Harmony Fields. She would claim her grandmother's legacy. Or she would die trying. Day 1. 6:47 a.m. Elena hadn't slept. She'd spent the entire night reading everything she could find about Richard Donnelly. Real estate deals that had destroyed families. Elderly people tricked into signing away their land. Legal maneuvers that somehow always worked in his favor. And now he was coming for her grandmother's farm. Grace found her at the kitchen table at dawn, phone in hand, dark circles under her eyes. You didn't sleep at all, did you? I couldn't. Elena turned the phone toward Grace. Look at this. Richard Donnelly has done this before, dozens of times. He finds properties tied up in estate disputes, files fake claims, and takes everything before the real heirs even know what's happening. Grace took the phone and scrolled through the articles. Her expression darkened. This is worse than I thought. He's been planning this for years, maybe since before my grandmother even died. Elena's voice cracked. Mrs. Patterson kept me hidden so he could swoop in and take everything. They've been working together. Can you prove that? Not yet, but I will. Grace set down the phone and looked at Elena directly. My sister Linda is on her way. She'll be here in 20 minutes, but before we go to Sweetwater, I need to ask you something. What? Are you sure about this? Richard Donnelly has lawyers' money connections. You have nothing. If you go up against him and lose, you won't just lose the farm. You could lose your baby, too. Elena's hand went to her belly. Her daughter was awake now, moving restlessly as if she could sense the tension. I've been losing my whole life, Elena said quietly. Every foster home that sent me back, every family that decided they didn't want me, every time I thought I'd found somewhere I belonged, it got ripped away. She met Grace's eyes. This is different. This farm, this family I never knew I had, it's mine. Really mine, and I'm not going to let 2 people who've spent years trying to destroy me take it without a fight. Grace studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, let's go get your farm. Day 1, 7:32 a.m. Linda Sullivan drove a battered pickup truck that smelled like coffee and dog hair. She was younger than Grace, sharper around the edges, with the kind of no-nonsense attitude that came from raising 4 kids on a teacher's salary. So you're Maggie Carter's granddaughter, Linda said as Elena climbed into the passenger seat. I'll be damned. The whole county thought that family line died out. It almost did, Elena said. Someone made sure of that. Linda glanced at her sister in the back seat, then back at Elena. Grace told me about Richard Donnelly. That man's been sniffing around Monroe County for months. Showed up right after Maggie's 5-year death anniversary, started asking questions about the property, the estate, whether anyone knew if there were surviving relatives. Elena's stomach tightened. He was waiting for the legal window to open so he could file his claim. Looks that way. But here's the thing. Linda merged onto the highway, her eyes fixed on the road. Harold Bennett Maggie's lawyer has been blocking every attempt to sell or transfer that property. For 5 years, he's been telling the courts that the rightful heir might still come forward. He knew about me. He knew Maggie believed you were alive. Whether he actually knows who you are, Linda shrugged. That's what we're going to find out. They drove in silence for a while. Elena watched the Tennessee landscape roll past, so different from the gray concrete of Portland. Rolling hills covered in early spring green, farms with red barns and white fences, apple orchards just starting to bloom. This was where her family had lived for 100 years, where her mother had grown up, where her grandmother had spent her life, and she'd never even known it existed. Can I ask you something? Linda said suddenly. Sure. If you get this farm, what are you going to do with it? You're 19, pregnant, never worked a day on a farm in your life. 200 acres of apple orchards doesn't run itself. Elena had been thinking about that question all night. I don't know yet, she admitted, but I know I'm not going to let Richard Donnelly tear it apart and sell it piece by piece. My grandmother spent her whole life on that land. My mother grew up there. Whatever I do, I'm going to honor that. Linda nodded slowly. Good answer. Day 1, 8:58 a.m. Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered before she could stop herself. Good morning, Elena? A man's voice this time. Smooth. Confident. My name is Richard Donnelly. I believe we have some things to discuss. Elena's blood went cold. How did you get this number? Patricia Patterson was kind enough to share it. She's been very helpful in our partnership. He paused. I understand you're on your way to Sweetwater right now. I'd strongly advise against that. And why is that? Because you're wasting your time. I have documentation proving I'm Margaret Carter's nephew. I have lawyers who've been building this case for months, and I have Another pause. Friends in places that can make your life very difficult. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You're a foster kid with a key and a story. I'm a businessman with resources. This isn't a fight you can win. Elena gripped the phone tighter. My grandmother left me that key for a reason. She wanted me to have that farm. Richard laughed. It was a cold sound. Your grandmother is dead. What she wanted doesn't matter anymore. What matters is who has the legal standing to claim her property, and that's me. We'll see about that. Yes, we will. In 8 days when the court rules in my favor. His voice hardened. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to make you an offer. I'm not interested. Hear me out. $50,000 cash. You walk away, sign a document renouncing any claim to the property, and you never have to think about Harmony Fields again. You could start a new life somewhere. Give your baby a decent childhood. For one terrible moment, Elena was tempted. $50,000 was more money than she'd ever seen. It could pay for an apartment for baby supplies for a real chance at stability. But then she thought about her grandmother searching for her every year for 15 years. About Mrs. Patterson hiding her file, keeping her lost. About the farm waiting in Tennessee, the only connection she'd ever have to the family she'd never known. No. Elena, be reasonable. I said no. That farm is mine, and I'm going to prove it. Silence on the line. When Richard spoke again, his voice was different, harder, dangerous. I tried to do this the easy way. Remember that. The line went dead. Linda glanced at Elena. Donnelly. He offered me $50,000 to walk away. And you said no. I said no. Linda let out a low whistle. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. It's not guts, Elena said quietly. It's the only thing I have left. Day 1, 10:14 a.m. Sweetwater was smaller than Elena had expected. One main street with a handful of shops, a diner, a hardware store, a church with a white steeple, the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Linda parked in front of a 2-story brick building with a sign that read Harold Bennett, Attorney at Law. This is it, she said. Harold's been practicing law in this town for 50 years. If anyone can help you prove who you are, it's him. Elena climbed out of the truck, her movements awkward with her belly. Her back ached, her feet were swollen. But she was here. She was finally here. The law office was on the second floor up a narrow staircase that made Elena's heart pound with the effort of climbing. By the time she reached the top, she was breathing hard and her baby was kicking in protest. A receptionist looked up from her desk, elderly gray-haired with reading glasses perched on her nose. Can I help you? I need to see Harold Bennett. It's about the Carter estate. The receptionist's expression shifted. Surprise. Then something else. Wariness. Do you have an appointment? No, but I think he'll want to see me. Elena pulled out the brass key and held it up. Margaret Carter was my grandmother. The receptionist stared at the key for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. Harold, there's someone here you need to see. Day 1, 10:31 a.m. Harold Bennett was 80 years old, with sharp eyes, and a handshake that was surprisingly strong for his age. He ushered Elena into his office, closed the door behind them, and studied her face for a long moment. You have her eyes, he said finally. Maggie's eyes. I noticed it the moment you walked in. You knew her well, 40 years. Harold sat down heavily behind his desk. I drew up her will when she was 45. handled her husband's estate when he died, watched her search for you every single year until the day she couldn't travel anymore. Elena's throat tightened. She really looked for me. Every spring. She'd drive up to Oregon, visit every foster agency, every group home, anyone who might have information. She never gave up. Harold's voice softened. Even after her health started failing, she made me promise to keep looking, to keep the farm waiting for you. Elena pulled out the photograph and the key, setting them on Harold's desk. She left these in my file, hidden at the bottom of my documents. I didn't find them until 2 days ago. Harold picked up the key, turning it over in his hands. This was Maggie's father's key. He gave it to her when she took over the farm, and she always said she'd give it to her grandchild someday. He looked at Elena. She believed you'd come? Even when everyone else told her to give up, she believed. Why couldn't she find me if she was looking? Why didn't she find me? Harold's expression darkened. Someone was blocking her. Every time her investigators got close, the trail would go cold. Files would disappear. Social workers would claim they had no records. Maggie spent a fortune trying to find you, and every door kept slamming in her face. Mrs. Patterson, Elena said, the director of my group home. She admitted it to me 2 days ago. She's been hiding me my whole life. Why, revenge. She says my grandmother fired her father when he was sick, destroyed her family. Elena's voice hardened. So she decided to destroy mine. Harold was quiet for a moment, processing. That explains the legal obstacles too, he said finally. Every time I tried to trace Caroline's daughter through official channels, something would block me. Missing paperwork, sealed records clerks who suddenly couldn't find files. Caroline, my mother. Elena leaned forward. What happened to her? Why did she leave me? Harold sighed heavily. That's a longer story, and a painful one. I need to know. He studied her for a moment, then he stood up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner of his office. He pulled out a thick folder and brought it back to his desk. Maggie gave me this before she died. Everything she knew about Caroline. Everything about you. She wanted you to have it when you came. Elena's hands trembled as she took the folder. Before you open that, Harold said, there's something you need to understand. Your mother wasn't a bad person. She was sick, severely mentally ill, and she made a terrible decision from a place of fear and confusion, not cruelty. Elena knotted her throat too tight to speak. She opened the folder. Day 1, year 11:02 a.m. The first thing she saw was a photograph of Caroline Carter at 17. Dark hair, light brown eyes, a smile that looked uncertain, like she wasn't quite sure she deserved to be happy. Elena touched the photograph gently. Her mother. Her real mother. She was beautiful, she whispered. She was, and she was brilliant too, valedictorian of her high school class, had a scholarship to Vanderbilt. Everyone thought she'd do great things. Harold's voice was heavy. Then the summer before college, something changed. Elena kept flipping through the folder. Medical records, psychiatric evaluations, hospital admission forms. Bipolar disorder, she read, with psychotic features. It came on suddenly and severely. 1 month she was planning her college classes, the next she was hearing voices and believing people were following her. Maggie did everything she could, therapy, medication, hospitalization, but Caroline was never the same. More documents. Caroline dropping out the Vanderbilt after 1 semester. Caroline admitted to a psychiatric facility in Nashville. Caroline released, then admitted again 2 months later. She came home to the farm when she was 20, Harold continued. Seemed stable for a while. Maggie thought the worst was over. And then she met a man, someone passing through town. Charming, reckless, the worst possible person for someone in Caroline's condition. Harold paused. By the time Maggie realized what was happening, Caroline was pregnant, and the man was gone. Elena kept reading. Found a document that made her stop cold. A birth certificate, her birth certificate, baby girl Carter. Born March 15, 2003 at Sweetwater General Hospital. Mother Caroline Marie Carter. Father unknown. Baby girl Carter. She hadn't even been given a name. Caroline struggled after you were born, Harold said quietly. Postpartum psychosis on top of her existing illness. She became convinced that she was dangerous to you, that she would hurt you without meaning to. The voices told her the only way to protect you was to get away. Elena's vision blurred with tears. So she left me. She drove to Nashville in the middle of the night, left you at a church with nothing but a note saying she was sorry. Harold's voice cracked. Maggie found the note the next morning. By the time she got to Nashville, Child Protective Services had already taken you. And then everything fell apart. The system wouldn't release you to Maggie. Caroline disappeared completely, and every attempt to find either of you hit a wall. Mrs. Patterson, Elena said bitterly. Apparently so. Harold leaned forward. But here's what matters now. You're here. You're real. And you have every right to claim your grandmother's estate. Richard Donnelly filed a claim 3 weeks ago. He says he's Maggie's nephew. Harold's expression hardened. Richard Donnelly is a fraud. Maggie was an only child. There is no nephew. Can you prove it? I can prove Maggie had no siblings. What I can't prove yet is who you are. The court will require DNA evidence, birth certificates, documentation of your lineage. I have my birth certificate. It says my mother is Caroline Carter. That's a start, but we need more. We need something that proves Caroline was Maggie's daughter and that you're the Elena Carter named in Maggie's will. Elena froze. There's a will? Harold smiled for the first time. There's a will. Maggie wrote it 22 years ago, right after you were born. She left everything to her granddaughter, Elena Carter. Elena's heart pounded. Then I can claim the farm. If we can prove you're Elena Carter, the will names you specifically, but without documentation connecting you to Caroline and Caroline to Maggie Richard Donnelly's lawyers will argue that any Elena Carter could claim to be the heir. What do I need? Harold pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. DNA evidence would be ideal. If we can get a sample from the farm and match it to you that's irrefutable. Caroline left things at the house when she disappeared. Hairbrushes, toothbrushes, personal items. The state lab can compare them to your DNA. How long will that take? 5 to 7 days, just in time for the court hearing. Harold looked at her seriously. But there's a catch. Richard Donnelly knows about the DNA option. He's been trying to gain access to the farm to remove any biological evidence. Can he do that? Not legally. I've had the property locked down since Maggie died, but... Harold hesitated. But what? Someone broke into the farmhouse 2 weeks ago. I don't know what they took or what they destroyed. If Donnelly got to the evidence first... Elena felt sick. Then I have nothing. Not necessarily. There might be other documentation at the farm. Letters, photographs, records. Maggie was meticulous about keeping family history. If anything survived, it would prove your connection. Elena stood up, her baby kicking hard. Take me there. Take me to Harmony Fields, now. Day 1. 7 p.m. Harold drove them in his old Lincoln. Linda and Grace followed in the truck. Elena sat in the passenger seat clutching the folder of documents, trying to prepare herself for what she was about to see. The farm's been empty for 5 years, Harold warned. There's been some vandalism, weather damage. It won't look like it did in Maggie's photographs. I don't care what it looks like, I just need what's inside. They turned onto a narrow county road, past a faded wooden sign that read Harmony Fields Farm Est, 1923. And then Elena saw it, the farmhouse from the photograph. White 2 stories with a wraparound porch and green shutters. It was weathered and worn paint-peeling shutters, crooked porch sagging in places. But it was standing. It was real, and it was hers. Stop the car, Elena whispered. Harold pulled over at the end of the long gravel driveway. Elena got out slowly, her eyes fixed on the house. The March wind carried a faint scent of apple blossoms from the overgrown orchard behind it. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. She'd never been here before, but somehow, deep in her bones, she recognized it. Home. The key, Harold said, coming to stand beside her. The one Maggie left you. It opens the front door. Elena pulled out the brass key, her grandmother's key, her great-grandfather's key before that. She started walking toward the house. Day 1, 1:15 p.m. The front door was standing open. Elena stopped cold. Behind her, she heard Harold swear under his breath. Someone's been here, he said. Recently. That door was locked when I checked it last week. Elena's heart hammered. Richard Donnelly. Probably, or someone working for him. Harold pulled out his phone. I'm calling the sheriff. But Elena didn't wait. She climbed the porch steps, her hand pressed against her belly, and walked through the open door. The inside was chaos. Furniture overturned. Drawers pulled out and emptied. Papers scattered across the floor. Someone had been searching desperately, destructively, without any care for what they damaged. No, Elena breathed. She moved through the house, stepping over debris, looking for anything that might have survived. The living room was destroyed. The kitchen ransacked. Her grandmother's bedroom torn apart. And then she found Caroline's room. It was untouched. Elena stopped in the doorway, confused. Why would whoever did this destroy every other room but leave this one alone? Then she saw it, a padlock on the door, new, shiny, recently installed. Harold? The old lawyer appeared behind her, breathing hard from the stairs. Someone locked this room, Elena said, after they searched the rest of the house. Shh. Harold's eyes narrowed. They were looking for something specific, and they didn't want anyone else to find it. Can we get it open? Harold examined the lock. Not without bolt cutters, but I might know someone who has some. He made a phone call. 15 minutes later, a pickup truck pulled into the driveway. A big man in his 60s got out carrying a heavy pair of bolt cutters. Earl Thompson, Harold said. He's been looking after the property since Maggie died. Earl climbed the stairs, nodded at Elena, and cut through the padlock in one swift motion. The door swung open. Elena stepped inside. Caroline's room. Her mother's room. Everything exactly as it had been left 22 years ago. A bed with a faded quilt. A dresser with a cracked mirror. Bookshelves filled with worn paperbacks. And on the walls, photographs. Dozens of photographs. Caroline as a baby. Caroline as a toddler. Caroline on her first day of school. Caroline graduating high school. And in the corner, almost hidden behind a stack of boxes, a small wooden chest with a brass latch. Elena crossed the room and knelt in front of it. The latch was unlocked. She lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, a locket on a thin gold chain, a hospital bracelet so small it could only have belonged to a newborn, and at the very bottom a piece of paper covered in Caroline's handwriting. Elena picked it up with trembling hands. My dearest Elena, she read aloud, if you're reading this, then you found your way home. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to meet you. I'm so sorry for everything. Tears streamed down Elena's face. I want you to know that I loved you from the moment I knew you existed. I loved you more than anything in the world. But my mind was broken, and I was so afraid of hurting you that leaving seemed like the only way to keep you safe. She couldn't continue. The words blurred through her tears. Harold took the letter gently from her hands and kept reading. Your grandmother will take care of you. She'll give you everything I couldn't. The farm, the family history, the love you deserve. Please don't hate me for leaving. I did the only thing I knew how to do. His voice cracked on the last lines. You are a Carter woman. That means you're stronger than you know. Whatever happens, remember that you come from people who survived. And you will survive too. All my love forever. Your mother, Caroline. Elena collapsed against the chest, sobbing. Her mother had loved her. Had written her a letter hoping she would someday find it. Had left her these treasures, these pieces of proof hidden in the one room that hadn't been destroyed. There's more, Earl said quietly. He'd been standing in the doorway, watching. At the bottom of the chest, look. Elena wiped her eyes and looked. Beneath the letters, beneath the locket, and the hospital bracelet was a manila envelope. She opened it. Inside it was a birth certificate. An official Tennessee birth certificate, not the copy from the hospital. Mother Caroline Marie Carter, daughter of Margaret Rose Carter and James William Carter. Father unknown. Child's name Elena Caroline Carter. She had a name. Her mother had given her a name. And the birth certificate proved exactly who she was. That's it, Harold said. Said his voice thick with emotion. That's the proof we needed. Elena Caroline Carter named on this birth certificate, daughter of Caroline Carter, granddaughter of Margaret Carter. It's all there. Elena clutched the document to her chest. It's not over yet, she said. Richard Donnelly isn't going to give up just because we found this. As if on cue, her phone rang. Unknown number, she answered. Congratulations. Mrs. Patterson's voice dripped with mock sweetness. I hear you found your mother's letter. How touching. How do you know about that? Richard has people watching the farm. They called him the moment you walked inside. A pause. I have to admit, I'm impressed. I didn't think you'd make it this far. I'm not stopping here. No, I don't suppose you are. That's the problem with Carter women. Too stubborn to know when you're beaten. Mrs. Patterson's voice hardened. But here's something you should know. That birth certificate you found Richard's lawyers are going to argue it's a forgery. They'll say you planted it. They'll tie this case up in court for months, years, and by the time it's resolved, the farm will be worthless. You can't do that. We can do anything we want. We have money, we have lawyers, we have time. A pause. You have none of those things, and in about 7 days you're going to have a baby to take care of too. Elena's hand went to her belly. Why are you telling me this, femme? Because I want you to understand how hopeless your situation is. Because I want you to spend the next week knowing that everything you're fighting for is going to slip through your fingers. Because... Mrs. Patterson's voice dropped to a whisper. I want you to suffer the way my father suffered, watching everything he built get taken away piece by piece until there was nothing left. The line went dead. Elena stood in her mother's room surrounded by the remnants of a life she'd never known, clutching proof of her identity that might not be enough. 7 days until the court hearing. 7 days until her baby was due. 7 days to save everything or lose it all. She looked at Harold, at Earl, at Grace, and Linda, who had followed them inside. I need more evidence, she said. Something they can't argue against, something irrefutable. Harold nodded slowly. There might be one thing. Maggie's journal. She kept it her entire life. Every important event, every document, every piece of family history, she recorded it all. If we can find that journal, it would have everything we need. Where is it? I don't know. Maggie hid it somewhere before she died. Told me she didn't want anyone finding it until the right person came looking. The right person, Elena repeated. She looked around Caroline's room, at the photographs on the walls, at the chest full of treasures her mother had left behind. Her grandmother had hidden a journal somewhere in this house, a journal that would prove everything, and Elena had 7 days to find it. Then we start searching, she said. Now. Day 1, 6:23 p.m. They searched until dark. Every room, every closet, every floorboard that might hide a secret compartment. Nothing. Elena sat on the porch as the sun set, exhausted and discouraged. Her back ached. Her feet were swollen. Her baby was restless, kicking constantly as if she could sense her mother's stress. You should rest, Grace said, sitting down beside her. This isn't good for you or the baby. I can't rest. Every minute I waste is a minute Richard Donnelly uses against me. And if you collapse from exhaustion, if you go into early labor from stress, what then? Elena didn't have an answer. Grace put an arm around her shoulders. You found proof of who you are today. Real documented proof. That's more than you had yesterday. Tomorrow we'll find the journal, but tonight you need to sleep. Elena wanted to argue, but her body was screaming for rest, and deep down she knew Grace was right. Okay, she said quietly. One night, but tomorrow we keep searching. Tomorrow we keep searching. They drove back to Grace's apartment in Knoxville. Elena lay in the spare bedroom staring at the ceiling, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. 7 days, one journal, everything she'd ever wanted hanging in the balance. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but even in her dreams she could hear Mrs. Patterson laughing. Day 2, 4:47 a.m. Elena woke to her phone ringing. Unknown number. She answered, bracing herself for another threat. Is this Elena Carter? A man's voice. Not Richard. Not Mrs. Patterson. Someone older, rougher. Who is this? My name is Thomas Reed. I was your grandmother's farmhand for 30 years. A pause. I know where Maggie hid her journal, and I know Richard Donnelly is coming to destroy it at dawn. Day 2, to 49 a.m. Elena sat up so fast her head spun. How do you know about the journal? Because I helped Maggie hide it. Thomas Reed's voice was gruff, urgent. 30 years I worked that farm. She trusted me with everything, and right before she died, she made me promise to protect that journal until her granddaughter came home. Why didn't you come forward sooner? I didn't know you existed until yesterday. Saw Harold Bennett at the diner, heard him talking about Maggie's granddaughter showing up after all these years. I've been watching the farm ever since, making sure nobody got to it before you did. Elena threw off her blankets, her heart pounding. You said Richard Donnelly is coming at dawn. How do you know? Because I just watched 3 of his men pull up to the old barn on the east side of the property. They've got flashlights and crowbars. They're waiting for first light to start tearing the place apart. The barn, the journal, is in the barn. Hidden where nobody would think to look, but Donnelly's got people who know how to search. If they find it before you do, I'm coming, right now. Where do I meet you? Thomas gave her directions to a spot on the county road, half a mile from the farm's main entrance. Come alone if you can, less noise, less attention, and Elena. What? Bring that key your grandmother left you. You're going to die. You're going to need it. Elena was out the door in 3 minutes. She left a note for Grace explaining where she'd gone, grabbed the brass key from her pocket, and slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness. Grace's car was parked on the street keys hanging by the door where she always left them. Elena hesitated for only a second before taking them. She'd apologize later. Right now, every minute counted. Day 2, about 17 a.m. The drive to Monroe County took 40 minutes in the darkness. Elena pushed the speed limit the entire way, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, her baby kicking restlessly as if she could sense the urgency. Thomas Reed was waiting exactly where he'd said he would be. An old man, maybe 70, with weathered hands and sharp eyes that reminded Elena of Harold Bennett. He climbed into the passenger seat without a word. "Drive past the main entrance, he said. "There's a service road about a quarter mile up, leads to the back of the property." Elena followed his directions, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of Donnelly's men. "Tell me about the journal," she said as she drove. "What's in it?" "Everything. Maggie started keeping it when she was 16 years old. Every important event in her life documented with dates and details. Her wedding, James's death, Caroline's birth, her illness, her disappearance. And most importantly," Thomas paused, "your birth. Your mother brought you home from the hospital, and Maggie wrote pages about you. Described everything. Your weight, your hair color, a birthmark on your left shoulder blade." Elena's breath caught. "I have a birthmark there." "I know. Maggie described it as shaped like a crescent moon. Said it was proof that you were a Carter woman because her mother had the same mark and her grandmother before her." Elena had never thought about that birthmark, had never known it meant anything. "If that journal documents my birth describes my birthmark, then Donnelly's lawyers can't claim the birth certificate is a forgery. They can't claim you're an imposter. The journal proves you're exactly who you say you are." The service road was rough and overgrown. Elena drove slowly, trying not to make noise until Thomas held up his hand. "Stop here. We go the rest of the way on foot." Day 2, 5:34 a.m. The walk through the pre-dawn darkness was the hardest thing Elena had ever done. Her back screamed with every step. Her swollen feet caught on roots and stones she couldn't see. Twice she had to stop and lean against Thomas, breathing through contractions that might have been real labor or might have been stress. She couldn't tell anymore. "Almost there," Thomas whispered. "The barn's just over this rise." They crested the hill and Elena saw it. The old red barn from her grandmother's photographs, standing dark and silent against the lightning sky, and beside it, three shadows moving with flashlights. "They're already searching," Elena breathed. "They don't know where to look. Maggie hid that journal somewhere nobody would think to check." Thomas pointed toward the far corner of the barn. "There's a root cellar underneath. Entrance is hidden behind a hay bale. That's where the journal is." "How do we get past them?" Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out an old revolver. Elena's eyes widened. "I'm not going to shoot anyone," Thomas said quietly. "But they don't know that. I'll create a distraction on the other side of the property, draw them away. You get into that cellar, find the journal, and get out. And if they catch you, then you keep going anyway. That journal is the only thing that matters. Maggie died waiting for you to find it. Don't let her down." Before Elena could respond, Thomas was moving, disappearing into the darkness toward the other side of the barn. A moment later, she heard a gunshot ring out, then another, then shouting, running footsteps, the flashlights converging away from her position. Elena ran. Day 2, 41 a.m. The hay bale was exactly where Thomas had described it. Elena shoved it aside with strength she didn't know she had, revealing a wooden trap door with a rusted iron ring. She pulled. The door didn't budge. She pulled harder, her back screaming, her baby kicking in protest. The door groaned and finally gave way. Stone steps led down into absolute darkness. Elena descended carefully, one hand on the cold wall, the other on her belly. The cellar smelled of earth and age and something else, something familiar that she couldn't identify. Apples. It smelled like apples. She reached the bottom and pulled out her phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the space. The cellar was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. Stone walls, dirt floor, and in the corner a wooden chest covered in dust. Elena crossed the space and knelt before the chest. Her hands were shaking as she lifted the lid. Inside was a leather-bound journal thick with decades of entries, and beneath it a bundle of documents tied with ribbon. And beneath that, Elena's breath caught. A photograph of herself as a baby, held by a young woman with dark hair and haunted eyes. Caroline, her mother, holding her. Elena touched the photograph gently, tears streaming down her face. "I found it, Mama," she whispered. "I found everything." A sound from above. Footsteps on the barn floor. Elena grabbed the journal, the documents, the photograph, stuffed them into her jacket, started for the stairs. Too late. A flashlight beam hit her full in the face. Well, well. A man's voice, cold, amused. The prodigal granddaughter herself. Day 2, 47 a.m. Richard Donnelly stood at the top of the cellar stairs, blocking her only exit. He was younger than Elena had expected, maybe 45. Expensive suit, expensive watch, smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him, 2 large men with the look of professional muscle. I have to admit, Richard said, I didn't think you'd find this place. Patricia said you were just a dumb foster kid who'd give up at the first obstacle. Clearly, she underestimated you. Elena's hand went to her belly. Her baby was still. Too still. Get out of my way. I don't think so. Richard descended the first few steps, his flashlight never leaving her face. You have something that belongs to me. Hand over the journal. It doesn't belong to you. Nothing here belongs to you. That's where you're wrong. In 6 days, a court is going to rule that I'm Margaret Carter's legal heir. Everything on this property, the house, the barn, the land, and whatever's hidden in this cellar will be mine. You're not her heir. You're not even related to her. Richard laughed. Of course I'm not related to her, but I have documents that say I am. I have lawyers who will swear I am, and most importantly, he took another step down. I have the resources to make this fight last for years. Can you say the same? Elena backed against the far wall, clutching the journal to her chest. What do you want? I already told you, $50,000 and you walk away, but that offer expired the moment you broke into this barn. Richard's smile faded. Now I want the journal, and then I want you to disappear. Go back to Oregon, have your baby, forget Harmony Fields ever existed. And if I refuse, Richard glanced at his men, then this becomes unpleasant for everyone. Elena's mind raced. She was trapped in a cellar with no exit. She was 7 months pregnant. She had no weapon, no phone signal, no way to call for help, but she had one thing Richard didn't know about. There's something you should understand, she said, her voice steady. My grandmother spent 15 years looking for me. 15 years. She never gave up. She never stopped fighting. Touching. What's your point? My point is that I'm a Carter woman, and Carter women don't give up either. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the brass key. Richard frowned. What is that supposed to? Elena threw herself at the wall behind her. Not randomly. She'd noticed something when she first entered the cellar. A seam in the stones. A shape that didn't quite match the others. The shape of a keyhole. The key slid into the wall, turned, and a section of stone swung inward, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Elena didn't hesitate. She plunged through the opening just as Richard shouted for his men to grab her. Day 2, 5:52 a.m. The passage was barely wide enough for Elena to squeeze through sideways. Her belly scraped against the stone. Her shoulders caught on rough edges. But she kept moving, driven by pure adrenaline, as Richard Donnelly's curses echoed behind her. Find another way in, she heard him scream. She can't have gone far. The passage twisted, turned, climbed upward. Elena's lungs burned. Her baby was kicking now hard, as if urging her forward. And then she saw light. Gray pre-dawn light filtering through a gap in the stones ahead. She pushed through and found herself on the hillside behind the barn, hidden by overgrown brush and fallen trees. Behind her, she could hear Richard's men crashing through the property, searching for the tunnel's exit. She didn't wait for them to find it. Elena ran. Day 2, 6:08 a.m. She made it back to Grace's car just as the sun broke over the horizon. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition, but she forced herself to focus, to breathe, to drive. She had the journal. She had the documents. She had proof of who she was. Now she just had to stay alive long enough to use it. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won? You haven't. This is far from over. Elena didn't respond. She just drove. Day 2, 7:23 a.m. Harold Bennett was waiting at his office when Elena arrived. She'd called him from the road, told him everything. He'd said he'd have coffee ready and a plan in place by the time she got there. Let me see it, he said the moment she walked through the door. Elena handed over the journal. Harold sat down at his desk and began to read. His expression shifted as he turned the pages. Surprise, then wonder, then something that looked almost like grief. My God, he said quietly. She documented everything. Every single thing. Is it enough to prove who I am? Harold looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his eyes were wet. It's more than enough. Maggie described your birth in detail. The exact time, the exact weight, the birthmark on your shoulder blade. She even included a lock of your hair taped to the page with your footprint from the hospital. Elena's throat tightened. She kept all of that. She kept everything. Every photograph of you and Caroline, every letter she wrote to you that she could never send. Every year on your birthday, she wrote an entry telling you how much she loved you, how much she hoped you were safe and happy, how much she prayed you'd find your way home someday. Elena sank into a chair, overwhelmed. Can Richard Donnelly's lawyers argue against this? They can try, but this journal has been authenticated by Maggie's handwriting. The entries span decades. The physical evidence, the hair, the footprint can be matched to hospital records and DNA. Harold closed the journal carefully. Elena, you've won. You just don't know it yet. Before Elena could respond, the office door burst open. Grace stood there out of breath, her face pale. Elena, there's been an accident. Thomas Reed. He's in the hospital. Day 2, 8:15 a.m. Thomas Reed was in the intensive care unit at Monroe County Hospital. The official report said he'd fallen in the barn and hit his head. But the nurse who met Elena and Grace in the waiting room had a different story. He was beaten, she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Someone worked him over pretty good before they called 911. The police are investigating, but there were no witnesses and Mr. Reed can't talk yet. Elena's hands clenched into fists. Richard Donnelly. This was her fault. Thomas had put himself in danger to help her, and now he was lying in a hospital bed because of it. Can I see him? She asked. He's unconscious. Probably will be for a while, but the nurse hesitated. He said something when the paramedics brought him in, before he passed out. He said to tell the Carter girl that he doesn't regret anything, that Maggie would be proud of her. Elena's eyes burned. Thank you. She walked out of the hospital and stood in the parking lot trying to breathe, trying to think. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. I warned you. Richard Donnelly's voice was calm, almost bored. I told you this would become unpleasant. The old man was just the beginning. You had him beaten. I had nothing to do with what happened to Thomas Reed. He fell. These things happen to elderly people on rural properties. A pause. But accidents can happen to anyone, Elena, even young pregnant women who don't know when to quit. If you touch me, I'm not going to touch you. That would be crude. What I'm going to do is much more elegant. Richard's voice hardened. I'm going to destroy you in court. I'm going to prove that journal is a forgery. I'm going to tie this case up for years until you're broke and broken and I'm begging to take whatever settlement I offer. The journal isn't a forgery. It's real and you know it. What I know doesn't matter. What matters is what I can make a judge believe, and I can make judges believe almost anything. He laughed softly. You should have taken the $50,000, Elena. Now you get nothing. The line went dead. Elena stood there shaking with rage and fear and something else. Something harder. Something that felt like steel. She dialed Harold Bennett. We're not waiting for the court date, she said when he answered. I want to go on the offensive. I want to destroy Richard Donnelly before he destroys me. How? Mrs. Patterson. She's the key to all of this. She admitted to me that she's been working with Richard for years. If we can prove that connection, if we can show the court that they conspired to hide me from my grandmother, that would be fraud. Conspiracy, criminal charges. Exactly. Can you help me? Harold was quiet for a moment. I know a private investigator in Knoxville. He's good at finding things people don't want found. If there's a paper trail connecting Richard Donnelly to Patricia Patterson, he'll find it. Do it, whatever it costs. Elena, I have to warn you. If we go this route, we're declaring war. Richard Donnelly has resources, connections, powerful friends. He'll come after you with everything he has. Elena thought about her grandmother searching for her every year for 15 years. About Thomas Reed lying in a hospital bed because he'd tried to help her. About her mother Caroline sick and scared and alone who had loved her enough to write her a letter she might never read. Let him come, she said. I'm not afraid anymore. Day 2, 2:34 p.m. The private investigator's name was Marcus Webb. He was younger than Elena expected, maybe 35, with the kind of unremarkable face that would blend into any crowd. Harold tells me you're looking into Richard Donnelly, Marcus said when they met at a coffee shop in Knoxville. You know he's connected, right? Politicians, judges, law enforcement. Taking him down won't be easy. I don't need easy, I need possible. Marcus studied her for a moment. All right. Tell me everything you know about his connection to Patricia Patterson. Elena told him. The phone calls, the threats, Mrs. Patterson's admission that she and Richard had been working together for years, the attack on Thomas Reed. Marcus took notes without comment. When she finished, he looked up. "I'll be honest with you. This could take weeks to investigate properly. You said the court date is in 6 days. 5 now. Then we don't have time for a full investigation. What we need is a shortcut, something that gives us leverage quickly." "Like what?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. Patricia Patterson has been working in Oregon's child welfare system for 30 years. In that time, she's had access to thousands of case files, thousands of vulnerable children. He paused. If she was willing to hide one child for personal revenge, what else might she have done? What other files might she have manipulated? Elena's stomach turned. "You think there are others? I think it's worth checking. If we can find a pattern of misconduct, if we can show that hiding you wasn't an isolated incident, then we can discredit her testimony before she even gives it." Marcus nodded. "I have contacts in Portland. Give me 48 hours. If there's something to find, I'll find it." Day 3. 9:17 a.m. Elena spent the night at Grace's apartment, too exhausted and too pregnant to do anything else. She woke to her phone ringing. Marcus Webb. "I found something," he said without preamble. "Actually, I found a lot of something. Patricia Patterson has been busy." "Tell me." "In the past 15 years, she's been named in 7 different internal complaints at various facilities where she's worked. Allegations of file tampering, improper transfers, falsified records. Each complaint was dismissed for lack of evidence, but the pattern is clear." Elena sat up straighter. "Can we use this?" "By itself, no. Dismissed complaints don't prove anything, but here's where it gets interesting." Marcus paused. 3 of those complaints involve children from families with significant assets. Farms, businesses, inheritances, and in all 3 cases, those children were eventually placed with families who had connections to Richard Donnelly's real estate company. Elena's blood ran cold. He's been doing this for years, using Mrs. Patterson to hide children from their families so he can claim their inheritances. It looks that way. You weren't his first target, Elena, just his biggest. Can you prove the connection? I'm working on it, but I need more time. We don't have more time. The court date is in 4 days. Then we need to find another way to stall, something that buys us time to gather evidence. Elena's mind raced. 4 days. 4 days to prove a conspiracy that had been operating for over a decade, and then it hit her. Thomas Reed, she said. He's been watching that farm for 5 years. If Richard Donnelly has been planning this since my grandmother died, Thomas might have seen something. Evidence, visitors, meetings. Can you talk to him? He's in the hospital, unconscious. Then we need to hope he wakes up soon, because right now he might be our best chance at connecting Donnelly to Patterson before the court date. Day 3, 3:45 p.m. Elena was sitting in Thomas Reed's hospital room when his eyes finally opened. "Hey," she said softly, "you're awake." Thomas blinked, disoriented. Then his gaze focused on her face, and something like recognition flickered in his eyes. "Elena." His voice was barely a whisper. Did you get the journal?" "I got it. Because of you." She took his weathered hand in hers. "Thomas, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't—" "No." His grip tightened with surprising strength. "This isn't your fault. This is Donnelly. This is what he does." Thomas coughed weakly. "I've been watching him for 5 years. Saw him come to the farm dozens of times. Meeting with lawyers, taking photographs, planning." Elena leaned closer. "Thomas, do you have evidence, photographs, documents, anything that proves Donnelly has been targeting the farm since before my grandmother died?" Thomas's eyes closed for a moment. Elena thought he'd lost consciousness again. Then he spoke. "My cabin, on the north side of the property. There's a lockbox under the floorboards in the bedroom. Everything I collected over the years. Photographs of Donnelly meeting with strangers, license plates, dates and times. Why didn't you come forward with this before? Who would believe me, an old farmhand against a rich developer with connections everywhere?" Thomas's voice cracked. "But you're different. You're Maggie's granddaughter. You have standing. You can make people listen." Elena squeezed his hand. "I'm going to get that evidence. And I'm going to make sure Richard Donnelly pays for what he's done. To you, to me, to everyone he's hurt." Thomas smiled weakly. "Maggie was right about you. She always said you'd be strong. Said the Carter women always are." Day 3, 6:12 p.m. Earl Thompson drove Elena to Thomas's cabin on the north side of the property. They moved quickly, aware that Donnelly might have people watching. Earl kept lookout while Elena searched inside. The lockbox was exactly where Thomas had said it would be, hidden under loose floorboards in the small bedroom. Inside was a treasure trove of evidence. Photographs of Richard Donnelly at Harmony Fields dated as far back as 2018, a year before Maggie died. Meeting notes in Thomas's careful handwriting documenting conversations he'd overheard. License plate numbers matched to rental cars from Atlanta, where Donnelly's company was based. And most damning of all, a photograph of Richard Donnelly standing with Patricia Patterson at a restaurant in Portland. Dated 2017, 2 years before Elena's grandmother died. Years before Elena had any idea who she was or where she came from. They'd been planning this for years, maybe decades. Elena's hands shook as she gathered the evidence. "We need to get this to Harold," she said, "and to Marcus Webb. This proves everything." Earl nodded grimly. "Let's go, before Donnelly's people figure out what we found." Day 4, 10:23 a.m. The next 3 days passed in a blur of legal preparation and growing tension. Harold Bennett filed an emergency motion with the court presenting the new evidence and requesting that Richard Donnelly's claim be investigated for fraud. Marcus Webb continued digging, uncovering more connections, more victims, more proof of the conspiracy. And through it all, Elena's baby grew more restless. She was having contractions now. Not regular, not strong, but present. A reminder that her daughter was coming soon, whether the legal battle was resolved or not. "You need to rest," Grace said on the 4th morning. "This stress isn't good for the baby." "I'll rest after the hearing." "Elena?" "I'll rest after the hearing." The hearing was in 2 days. 2 days to present their evidence. 2 days to prove that Richard Donnelly was a fraud and that Elena was the rightful heir to Harmony Fields. 2 days to change her entire life. Day 4, 4:56 p.m. Elena was reviewing documents with Harold when her phone rang. A Portland area code. Not unknown this time. A number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. "Elena Carter." A woman's voice. Older, professional. "Who is this, Chamu?" "My name is Margaret Chen. I'm the director of Oregon Child Protective Services." A pause. "I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. We need to talk about Patricia Patterson." Elena's heart stopped. "What about her?" "She's been arrested. This morning. Based on evidence provided by a private investigator named Marcus Webb, we opened an internal investigation into her conduct over the past 15 years. Margaret Chen's voice was heavy. "What we found was disturbing." "What did you find?" "Systematic file manipulation, evidence tampering, conspiracy to defraud multiple families out of their rightful inheritances." A pause. "And in your case, specifically documented evidence that she deliberately hid your identity from your grandmother for over 2 decades. Elena couldn't breathe. She admitted it. She didn't have to. Mr. Webb found emails between Patricia Patterson and Richard Donnelly dating back to 2005. They detail everything. How they identified vulnerable children with potential inheritances. How they manipulated the system to keep those children hidden. How they planned to claim the assets after enough time had passed." Margaret Chen's voice hardened. "You weren't their first victim, Elena, but I promise you, you'll be their last." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "What happens now? Patricia Patterson is facing multiple felony charges. Richard Donnelly is being investigated by the FBI for wire fraud and conspiracy. And you," Margaret Chen paused, "you are officially recognized as Elena Caroline Carter, granddaughter of Margaret Rose Carter, rightful heir to the Harmony Fields estate. I'm sending you official documentation today." Elena sank into a chair, overwhelmed. It was over. After everything, it was finally over. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank the people who helped you get here. And thank your grandmother who never stopped believing you'd come home." Margaret Chen's voice softened. "Take care of yourself, Elena, and take care of that baby. You've earned a happy ending." Day 5, 8:34 a.m. The court hearing was almost anticlimactic after everything that had come before. Richard Donnelly didn't even show up. His lawyers filed a motion to withdraw his claim, citing newly discovered evidence that made their case untenable. The judge accepted the withdrawal, reviewed Elena's documentation, and officially recognized her as the sole heir to the Carter estate. Harmony Fields Farm was hers, 200 acres of apple orchards, a farmhouse that had sheltered her family for 100 years, a legacy that had almost been stolen from her. All of it legally and irrevocably hers. Elena stood outside the courthouse afterward, flanked by Harold and Grace and Linda, and tried to process what had happened. "How do you feel?" Grace asked. Elena placed her hand on her belly. Her daughter was quiet now, as if she too was taking in the magnitude of the moment. I don't know, Elena admitted. Happy, relieved, scared. She looked at the people who had helped her, who had believed in her when she had nothing. Grateful. Harold squeezed her shoulder. Your grandmother would be proud of you. You fought for what was yours, just like she would have. I couldn't have done it without all of you. That's what family is for, Linda said simply. And you've got family now, Elena, whether you like it or not. Family. Elena had spent her whole life believing she didn't have one, and now she had more than she'd ever imagined. Day 5. 2:17 p.m. They drove to Harmony Fields that afternoon. Elena walked through the front door of the farmhouse for the second time, but this time felt completely different. This time she wasn't a trespasser searching for evidence. She was the owner coming home. The house was still a mess from Richard Donnelly's search. Furniture, overturned drawers, emptied papers scattered. But underneath the chaos, Elena could see what it had been. What it could be again. A home. A real home. She walked through the room, slowly touching things gently. The stone fireplace where her grandmother had warmed herself on cold winter nights. The kitchen where generations of Carter women had prepared meals for their families. The porch where her mother had rocked her as a baby. And in Caroline's room, still untouched, she found the wooden chest again. Elena knelt before it and opened the lid. The documents she'd taken were gone used as evidence in the court case, but other things remained. A baby blanket soft and faded with age, a rattle shaped like an apple, a small stuffed bear with one eye missing, things her mother had kept for her, things that had been waiting for her return for 22 years. Elena held the bear to her chest and cried. Day 5. 5:45 p.m. She was still sitting in Caroline's room when the first real contraction hit. It was different from the Braxton Hicks she'd been having all week, sharper, more insistent, a wave of pressure that started in her back and wrapped around to her belly. Elena gasped and grabbed the edge of the bed. Grace? She called. Grace? Grace appeared in the doorway. What is it? What's wrong? I think. Another contraction hit stronger than the first. I think the baby's coming. Grace's expression shifted from concern to focused calm, the nurse taking over. How far apart are the contractions? I don't know. That was only the second one. Okay, we have time. Let's get you to the car. They made it halfway down the stairs before the third contraction hit. Elena doubled over, gripping the railing, unable to move. They're getting closer, she gasped. That was less than 3 minutes. Grace's calm cracked slightly. We might not make it to the hospital. Linda, call 911. Tell them we have a woman in active labor. Day 5, 6:23 p.m. The paramedics arrived in 18 minutes. By then, Elena's contractions were 2 minutes apart and getting stronger. The EMTs took one look at her and decided there wasn't time to get to the hospital in Knoxville. Monroe County Hospital is 15 minutes away, one of them said. We can make it there. The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and pressure and fear. Elena gripped Grace's hand so hard she was sure she was leaving bruises. But Grace didn't complain, just kept talking to her, coaching her through each contraction, reminding her to breathe. You're doing great, Grace said. You're so strong. Just a little longer. I'm scared, Elena admitted between contractions. What if something goes wrong? What if nothing is going to go wrong? You've survived 22 years of foster care across the country, pregnant and alone, fought off a criminal conspiracy and claimed your grandmother's farm. You can do this. Another contraction. Elena screamed. I can't. You can. You're a Carter woman, remember, and Carter women don't give up. Day 5, 7:41 p.m. Caroline Grace. Carter was born at 7:41 p.m. on a Thursday evening in Monroe County Hospital. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Dark hair like her mother and grandmother before her. Eyes that would eventually settle into the same light brown that every Carter woman had carried for generations. And on her left shoulder blade, barely visible against her newborn skin, a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. Elena held her daughter for the first time and felt something shift inside her. Every wound, every rejection, every year of loneliness and fear seemed to shrink in the face of this tiny, perfect person. Hey there, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm your mama. I've been waiting my whole life to meet you. Caroline Grace opened her eyes and looked at her mother, and Elena knew with absolute certainty that everything she'd been through had been worth it. Day 5, 11:58 p.m. Grace found Elena still awake that night, sitting up in the hospital bed with Caroline sleeping in her arms. You should rest, Grace said softly. You've been through a lot today. I know, Elena looked down at her daughter's face. I can't stop looking at her. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and this will all have been a dream. Grace sat down in the chair beside the bed. It's not a dream. She's real. The farm is real. All of it is real. I know, Elena's voice cracked, but I've spent my whole life having things taken away from me. Every time I thought I'd found somewhere I belonged, it disappeared. I'm scared that this will disappear too. Elena nodded, unable to speak. Grace reached out and took her hand. That's not going to happen. You have a home now. You have family. You have people who care about you and will fight for you. She squeezed Elena's fingers. You're not alone anymore, Elena. You never have to be alone again. Elena looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, at Grace, who had taken her in without question, at the window beyond which lay Harmony Fields waiting for them both. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. Her grandmother had loved her from a distance for 22 years. Her mother had loved her so much that leaving had seemed like the only way to protect her. And now she had Grace and Linda and Harold and Earl and Thomas, all of them forming a circle of protection around her and her daughter. Family, real family. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you find. The kind that finds you. Elena closed her eyes and let herself believe for the first time in her life that maybe she deserved to be happy. Maybe she deserved to come home. 2 weeks later, 7:23 a.m. Elena woke to the sound of Caroline Grace crying. It was a sound she'd gotten used to over the past 2 weeks, the hungry wail of a newborn demanding attention. But this morning, something felt different. Something felt wrong. She sat up in bed, her body still aching from childbirth, and reached for her daughter's bassinet. Empty. Elena's heart stopped. Caroline! She threw off the covers and stumbled to her feet, panic rising in her chest. The farmhouse was quiet. Too quiet. Caroline! In here? Grace's voice came from the kitchen, calm and reassuring. She woke up early and I didn't want to disturb you. We're just having some quality time. Elena sagged against the doorframe, relief flooding through her. Grace was sitting at the kitchen table, Caroline Grace cradled in her arms, a bottle of formula warming on the counter. The baby was awake, her dark eyes fixed on Grace's face with the intense focus that newborns sometimes have. You scared me, Elena said, her voice shaking. I woke up and she wasn't there, and I thought, I know, I'm sorry. I should have left a note. Grace stood up and handed Caroline to her mother. Old habits. My sister's kids used to stay with me, and I'd always let her sleep in while I handled the early morning feeding. Elena held her daughter close, was breathing in her baby scent, feeling her tiny heart beating against her chest. It's okay, I can't lose her. After everything, I can't. You're not going to lose her. Grace's voice was firm. You're her mother. You fought for her, and you're going to raise her right here on this farm, surrounded by people who love you both. Elena nodded, but the fear lingered. 2 weeks since Caroline's birth. 2 weeks since the court had recognized her as the rightful heir to Harmony Fields. 2 weeks of peace. It felt too good to be true. 2 weeks later. 10:45 a.m. Earl Thompson arrived mid-morning with news. The insurance company called Haren, he said, standing on the farmhouse porch with his hat in his hands. They finished their assessment of the property damage from Donnelly's break-in. They're willing to pay out, but there's a problem. Elena shifted Caroline to her other arm. What kind of problem? The adjuster found some structural issues with the barn. Apparently it's been neglected for longer than we thought. They're saying it might need to be torn down and rebuilt. How much would that cost? Earl hesitated. More than the insurance will cover. We're talking $100,000, maybe more. Elena's stomach dropped. She had money from the trust her grandmother had left, but not that much. Not nearly that much. What are our options? We could try to repair it ourselves, get some volunteers from town, do what we can with what we have. It won't be pretty, but it might be enough to keep the structure standing for a few more years. And if we can't, Earl's expression was grim, then we lose the barn, and without a barn running, any kind of agricultural operation becomes a lot harder. Elena looked out at the red barn in the distance, the one her great-grandfather had built with his own hands nearly a century ago, the one her grandmother had maintained for 60 years, the one that had survived everything except 5 years of neglect and one criminal's attempt to steal it. We're not losing that barn, she said quietly. We'll find a way. 2 weeks later. 2:34 p.m. Harold Bennett called that afternoon with worse news. Richard Donnelly made bail, he said without preamble. His lawyers argued flight risk was minimal, given his business ties to the area. The judge agreed. Elena's blood ran cold. He's out. He's free. For now, the federal investigation is ongoing, and he's been ordered to stay within state lines. But yes, technically, he's a free man until his trial. When is the trial? Months away, maybe longer. These things take time. Elena paced the living room, Caroline sleeping in the portable bassinet Grace had bought her. What if he comes after me again? What if he tries something? He'd be stupid to try anything while under federal investigation. Any contact with you, any hint of witness intimidation, and he goes straight back to jail. But you can't guarantee that. Harold was quiet for a moment. No, I can't guarantee that. All I can tell you is that the evidence against him is overwhelming. Patricia Patterson is cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's giving them everything: dates, names, other victims. Richard Donnelly is going to prison Elena. It's just a matter of time. Time? Elena repeated bitterly. That's what everyone keeps saying, but I don't have time. I have a newborn baby and a farm that's falling apart and... Her phone buzzed. Another call coming in. Unknown number. Elena's heart stopped. Harold, I'll call you back. She answered the incoming call. Silence on the other end, then breathing. Heavy. Deliberate. Who is this? You think you've won? Richard Donnelly's voice was barely a whisper. You haven't won anything. This isn't over. You're not supposed to contact me. You'll go back to jail. This isn't contact. This is a promise. His voice hardened. You took everything from me. My reputation, my freedom, my future. And I'm going to make sure you pay for every single thing you've cost me. I didn't take anything from you. You tried to steal my inheritance. You failed. That's not my fault. Your inheritance. Richard laughed. It was an ugly sound. Do you really think that farm is worth anything? Do you know why I wanted it so badly? Elena's grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? Your grandmother was sitting on something valuable, Elena. Something worth a lot more than 200 acres of dying apple trees. And now that you own the property, it belongs to you. He paused. But you don't know where it is. You don't even know what it is. And I do. You're lying. Am I? Ask yourself this: why would a real estate developer spend years planning to acquire a rundown farm in rural Tennessee? Why would I risk my entire career for a property that barely breaks, even in a good year? Elena couldn't answer. She'd wondered the same thing herself. There's something buried on that land, Richard said. Something your grandmother hid before she died. Something worth millions. And I'm the only one who knows what it is. Then tell me. Why would I do that? Because you're going to prison. Whatever's on this land, you'll never be able to claim it. Why not tell me and at least know someone benefits? Silence on the line. Because watching you struggle is more satisfying than any amount of money. Richard's voice dropped to a whisper. Enjoy your victory, Elena. It's going to taste like ashes. The line went dead. 2 weeks later. 4:12 p.m. Elena was still shaking when Grace found her. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Richard Donnelly called me. He's out on bail. Grace's expression darkened. That bastard? What did he say? Elena told her everything. The threats, the claim about something valuable hidden on the property, the promise that she would pay. He's messing with you, Grace said when she finished. Trying to get inside your head. That's what people like him do when they've lost. They try to make you feel like you haven't really won. But what if he's telling the truth? What if there really is something on this land? Then we'll find it. Without his help. Grace took Elena's hands in hers. Listen to me. You have fought too hard and come too far to let Richard Donnelly terrorize you from a distance. He's a con man, a liar. Everything he says is designed to manipulate you. I know, but nothing. You have a baby to take care of, a farm to rebuild, a life to live. Don't let him steal that from you, too. Get. Elena looked at Caroline Grace sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding her birth. Grace was right. She couldn't let Richard Donnelly control her life. Not anymore. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, we focus on what's in front of us. The barn, the farm, Caroline, everything else can wait. That's my girl. 3 weeks later. 9:15 a.m. The community came together in a way Elena had never experienced before. Word had spread about the barn's structural problems, and suddenly people she'd never met were showing up at Harmony Fields with tools and materials and offers to help. Farmers from neighboring properties, church members from Sweetwater Baptist, high school students looking for community service hours. Within a week, they had a full renovation crew working on the barn. I don't understand, Elena said to Linda Sullivan, who was coordinating volunteers with military precision. These people don't know me. Why are they helping? Linda laughed. Honey, they're not helping you. They're helping Maggie Carter's granddaughter. Your grandmother was a legend in this county. She helped everyone who needed it, never asked for anything in return. People have been waiting years for a chance to pay her back. But she's gone. And you're here. That's good enough for them. Linda handed Elena a clipboard. Now stop asking questions and start assigning tasks. We've got a barn to save. Elena threw herself into the work. Not the physical labor she was still recovering from childbirth, but the planning, the organizing, the endless decisions that needed to be made. Which repairs were most urgent? Which materials could be salvaged? How to stretch their limited budget as far as possible. It was exhausting, but it was also exactly what she needed. For the first time in her life, Elena felt like she was building something, not just surviving. Building. 3 weeks later, 2:47 p.m. Thomas Reed was released from the hospital that afternoon. Elena drove to Monroe County Hospital to pick him up. Caroline Grace secured in a car seat in the back. Thomas looked older than she remembered, frailer, but his eyes were sharp and his handshake was still firm. You didn't have to come yourself, he said as Elena helped him into the passenger seat. Earl could have picked me up. I wanted to. You risked your life for me. The least I can do is give you a ride home. Thomas was quiet for a moment, looking out the window as Elena pulled out of the parking lot. I heard about Donnelly's call, he said finally. Grace told me. She shouldn't have worried you with that. She was right to, because I know what he was talking about. Thomas turned to look at Elena. The thing he says is buried on your land. I know what it is. Elena nearly swerved off the road. What? Your grandmother told me before she died. Made me promise not to tell anyone unless the rightful heir came to claim the property. Thomas's voice was heavy. I wasn't sure it was true at first. Thought maybe her mind was going near the end. But now, after everything Donnelly's done to get his hands on that farm. Thomas, what is it? What's on my land? He was quiet for a long moment. Your grandfather James found it in 1962. He was digging a new well on the east side of the property when he hit something that wasn't supposed to be there. What? Bones? Human bones. And with them artifacts. Old ones. Pre-Columbian, according to the archaeologist your grandparents quietly hired to examine the site. Elena's mind reeled. There's an archaeological site on my property. More than a site. Your grandfather found what the archaeologists called a burial mound. The remains of an ancient Native American settlement. Hundreds, maybe thousands of years old. Yet, why didn't anyone report it? Because in 1962, a discovery like that meant the government could seize your land. Claim it for historical preservation. Your grandparents would have lost everything their families had built for generations. Thomas shook his head. So they covered it up, literally, filled in the excavation-planted trees over the site, and never told anyone except people they trusted absolutely. And Richard Donnelly found out somehow. That's my guess. Maybe he found old documents. Maybe he bribed someone who knew. Either way, he's known for years that your land is sitting on something valuable, something that could be worth millions to the right collector or institution. Elena pulled over to the side of the road. Her hands were shaking too badly to drive. If I report this discovery now, will I lose the farm? I don't know. The laws have changed since your grandparents' time. There might be ways to preserve both the site and your ownership. Thomas put a weathered hand on her arm. But you deserve to know the truth, Elena, whatever you decide to do with it. Elena sat there for a long time processing. She'd fought so hard to claim this land, to honor her grandmother's legacy, to build a future for her daughter. And now she learned it was built on top of someone else's history, someone else's ancestors. What was she supposed to do with that 4 weeks later? 8:33 a.m. Elena contacted a professor of archaeology at the University of Tennessee. His name was Dr. Samuel Wright, and when she told him what Thomas had described, he nearly dropped his phone. A pre-Columbian burial mound in Monroe County. That would be an incredible discovery. If it's authentic, it could rewrite our understanding of indigenous settlements in the region. What happens if I let you excavate it? We'd apply for the proper permits. Document everything according to federal guidelines. Work with tribal representatives to ensure the remains are treated respectfully. He paused. As for your property rights, that's more complicated. But there are models for private landowners partnering with academic institutions. You wouldn't necessarily lose your farm. What about the artifacts Thomas said there were artifacts? Any artifacts found on private land technically belong to the landowner, but selling them is ethically complicated and in many cases illegal. The respectful thing to do would be to donate them to a museum or return them to the relevant tribal nation. Elena thought about Richard Donnelly, who had spent years trying to steal this land so he could loot it for profit, who had probably planned to sell those artifacts to private collectors, destroying their historical and cultural significance. "I don't want to sell anything," she said. "I want to do this right, whatever that means." Dr. Wright's voice warmed. "Then I think we can work together. Can I come see the site?" 4 weeks later, 3:15 p.m. Dr. Wright arrived 2 days later with a team of graduate students and ground-penetrating radar equipment. Elena watched nervously as they surveyed the east side of the property, the area Thomas had identified. Caroline Grace slept in a carrier strapped to Elena's chest, oblivious to the significance of what was happening. "There's definitely something here," Dr. Wright said after several hours of scanning. "Multiple anomalies beneath the surface, consistent with the burial mound description your farmhand gave you." "What happens now?" "Now we apply for excavation permits. Contact the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, since this area was historically Cherokee territory. Begin the formal process of documenting and preserving what's here." "How long will that take?" "Months, maybe a year. These things can't be rushed." Dr. Wright looked at her seriously. "But Elena, this is important. If this site is what I think it is, it could be one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in Tennessee in decades. Your grandmother and grandfather protected it for 60 years. Now you have the chance to share it with the world the right way." Elena looked out at the peaceful hillside where her ancestors had buried their secret. Her grandmother had kept this hidden to protect the farm, had passed the secret to Thomas, trusting that someday the right person would know what to do with it. And now that person was her. "Do it," she said. "Whatever it takes, do it right." 5 weeks later, 11:22 a.m. The barn renovation was nearly complete. Elena stood in the doorway, Caroline Grace awake now, and watching the world with her increasingly alert, dark eyes. The structure that had nearly collapsed was solid again, reinforced with new beams and fresh paint ready to serve another generation of Carter women. "Your grandmother would cry if she could see this," Earl Thompson said, coming to stand beside her. "She worried so much about what would happen to this place after she was gone." "She shouldn't have worried. She left it to someone who would fight for it." "She didn't know that. For 22 years, she didn't know if you were alive or dead, safe or suffering. She just had faith." Earl's voice thickened. "That's the thing about Maggie. She always had faith, even when everyone else told her to give up." Elena thought about her grandmother writing in her journal every year on her birthday. Hoping, believing, waiting. "I wish I could have met her," she said quietly. "You did meet her. In the journal. In the letters. In every person whose life she touched in this community." Earl put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "She's here, Elena. She's always been here. And now so are you." 5 weeks later, 4:56 p.m., the call came that afternoon. Elena was feeding Caroline when her phone rang, a Portland number she didn't recognize. "Is this Elena Carter?" "Yes." "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a federal prosecutor working on the Donnelly case. I need to speak with you urgently." Elena's stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" "Richard Donnelly escaped custody this morning. He cut off his ankle monitor and disappeared from his approved residence sometime before dawn." The room spun. "He escaped. We have reason to believe he's heading to Tennessee, specifically to your location." Jennifer Walsh's voice was tense. "Ms. Carter, we're dispatching federal marshals to your property, but they won't arrive until tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I need you to take precautions. Lock your doors, don't answer for anyone you don't know, and if you see Richard Donnelly, call 911 immediately." Elena looked at Caroline Grace sleeping peacefully in her arms. "He's coming here. He's coming for me." "We don't know that for certain. But given his previous behavior and his stated threats against you, we have to assume the worst." A pause. "Is there somewhere safe you can go? Family friends somewhere Donnelly wouldn't think to look." Elena thought about running, taking Caroline and fleeing to Grace's apartment in Knoxville or further back to Portland, where she at least knew the streets. But she'd spent her whole life running. Running from foster homes, from group homes, from the woman who was supposed to protect her. She'd crossed the country, pregnant and alone, because she was tired of running. She wasn't going to start again now. "I'm staying," she said. "This is my home. I'm not leaving." "Ms. Carter, send your marshals, but I'm not going anywhere." Elena's voice hardened. If Richard Donnelly wants to finish this, he can find me right here. 5 weeks later. 9:47 p.m. Earl Thompson insisted on staying at the farmhouse overnight. "I've got my shotgun in the truck," he said, "and I know this property better than anyone alive. If Donnelly shows up, he won't get within 100 yards of this house." "You don't have to do this, Earl." "Yes, I do. Maggie would never forgive me if something happened to you and I wasn't here to help." He settled into a chair on the front porch, his shotgun across his knees. "You go take care of that baby. I'll keep watch." Elena tried to sleep, but every sound made her jump. The creak of the old house settling, the wind through the apple trees, a car passing on the distant county road. At midnight, she gave up and went to sit with Earl on the porch. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No?" "Don't blame you. I never could sleep worth a damn when trouble was coming." Earl shifted in his chair. "Want to hear a story might help pass the time." "Sure. Did you know your grandmother once chased off a bear with nothing but a frying pan?" Elena laughed despite her fear. "That can't be true." "Swear to God, it was 1978. Bear got into the chicken coop, started causing chaos. Maggie grabbed the first thing she could find, her cast iron skillet, and went out there in her nightgown, screaming like a banshee, swinging that pan like she was going to knock the bear's head off." "What happened?" "Bear took one look at her and ran. Didn't come back for 3 years." Earl chuckled. That was Maggie, afraid of nothing, or at least never willing to show her fear. Elena looked out at the darkness beyond the porch light. Somewhere out there, Richard Donnelly was coming for her, a man who had spent years planning her destruction, a man who had nothing left to lose. "How do you do it?" she asked quietly. "How do you face something that scares you without falling apart?" Earl was quiet for a moment. "You don't face it alone. That's the secret. Maggie wasn't brave because Laura says she wasn't afraid. She was brave because she had people depending on her. James, Caroline, the farm, this community." He looked at Elena. "You've got people depending on you now too, that baby in there, all the folks who've helped rebuild this barn, everyone who's invested in seeing you succeed. What if I fail them? Then you fail trying, and that's better than failing because you were too scared to fight." Earl shifted his shotgun. "Now get some rest. I've got a feeling tomorrow's going to be a long day." 5 weeks later. 4:33 a.m. Elena woke to Earl shouting. She was on her feet before she was fully conscious, grabbing Caroline from the bassinet, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Stay inside," Earl's voice came from the porch. "Don't come out." Then a gunshot, then another, then silence. Elena pressed herself against the wall, Caroline clutched to her chest, trying not to scream. The baby was awake now, whimpering, sensing her mother's terror. "Earl," she called. "Earl, are you okay?" No answer. She had to move, had to do something. But what? She had no weapon, no training, no way to fight off an attacker. Her phone. She needed her phone. She'd left it in the bedroom. She crept toward it, staying low, keeping Caroline as quiet as she could. The phone was on the nightstand. She grabbed it, dialed 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency?" "Someone's attacking my house. There were gunshots. Please, you have to help me." "Ma'am, what's your location?" "Harmony Fields Farm, off County Road 47. Please hurry. He's going to kill us." "Help is on the way. Stay on the line with me. Are you in a safe location?" Elena looked around desperately. The bedroom had one window, one door, no way out if someone came in. I don't know where's safe." "Is the attacker inside the house?" "I don't know. I heard gunshots outside. I don't know what happened." A creak from the hallway. Elena's blood turned to ice. "Someone's coming," she whispered. "Someone's inside." "Ma'am, hide if you can. Help is on the way." Elena looked at the closet. It was the only option. She slipped inside, pulled the door, almost closed, left just a crack so she could see, and waited. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Getting closer. Caroline started to cry. Elena clamped her hand over the baby's mouth, hating herself for it, knowing she had no choice. The crying muffled to a whimper. The footsteps stopped outside the bedroom door. A shadow fell across the crack in the closet door. "Elena," Richard Donnelly's voice was calm, almost friendly. "I know you're in here. I can hear the baby." Elena didn't move, didn't breathe. "The old man got lucky, winged me before I could put him down, but I'm not leaving without what I came for." He was in the bedroom now. She could hear him moving, searching. "All I want is the location of the burial site. Tell me where it is and I'll let you and the baby go." Elena knew he was lying. She could hear it in his voice. He was going to kill her no matter what she said. I know you're in the closet, Elena. I can see the door moving when you breathe. The closet door flew open. Richard Donnelly stood there, a gun in his hand, blood soaking through his shirt from a wound in his shoulder. His eyes were wild, desperate. Last chance, he said. Tell me where it is. Elena looked at the gun, looked at her daughter in her arms, looked at the man who had spent years trying to destroy her, and something inside her snapped. You want to know where it is? Her voice was steady, stronger than she'd ever heard it. It's nowhere you'll ever find it, because you're going to prison for the rest of your miserable life. And even if by some miracle you get out, this community will never let you set foot on this property again. Richard's face twisted with rage. You think you've won? You think. Sirens, in the distance, getting closer. Richard's head whipped toward the window. No. No, no, no. He turned back to Elena, his gun raised. If I can't have it, neither can you. Elena closed her eyes, held Caroline tight, and waited for the shot. It never came. A crash from the doorway. Earl Thompson, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, launching himself at Richard with a roar of rage. The two men went down, struggling for the gun. Another shot. Then silence. Elena opened her eyes. Earl was sitting on Richard Donnelly's chest, the gun in his hand pointed at the developer's head. Richard wasn't moving, but he was breathing his shoulder wound, and now a new wound in his leg, making him too weak to fight. Don't you move, Earl growled. Don't you even breathe. Blue lights flashed through the window. The sirens were right outside now. Elena? Earl's voice was gentle despite everything. Are you and the baby okay? Elena looked down at Caroline Grace, still whimpering in her arms, but alive. Unhurt. Safe. We're okay, she whispered. We're okay. Audit 5 weeks later. 7:15 a.m. The sun was rising by the time the police finished taking statements. Richard Donnelly was in custody heading to the hospital for treatment before being transferred to federal holding. Earl Thompson was being treated for his head wound, refusing to go to the hospital, insisting he'd had worse from ornery cattle. Elena sat on the front porch, Caroline Grace asleep in her arms, watching the chaos slowly wind down. Grace arrived just as the last police car was pulling away. I came as fast as I could. Are you okay? Is the baby okay? We're okay. Earl saved us. Grace sank down onto the porch step beside her. When I got the call, I thought I was going to lose you. Both of you. You almost did. Elena's voice cracked. He had a gun pointed at my head. He was going to shoot. If Earl hadn't... She couldn't finish. Grace put an arm around her shoulders and held her while she cried. It's over now, Grace said softly. It's really over. He's not getting out this time, not ever. Elena wiped her eyes and looked out at the farm. The barn newly restored. The orchards just starting to bloom. The hillside where an ancient people had buried their dead thousands of years ago. All of it hers. All of it worth fighting for. It's not over, she said quietly. It's just beginning. 6 weeks later. 10:00 a.m., Dr. Wright and his team began their official excavation. Elena watched as they carefully marked off the site, set up their equipment, began the painstaking process of uncovering what had been buried for so long. This is remarkable, Dr. Wright said, showing her the first artifacts they'd found. Pottery shards, stone tools, the remnants of a people who had lived and died on this land centuries before any European set foot in Tennessee. Your grandparents protected something truly precious. They protected it because they were afraid of losing their home. And now, they are sharing it with the world because you're not afraid anymore. He smiled. That's progress. That's how these things should work. A representative from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians arrived that afternoon. His name was Daniel Wolfe, and he spent hours walking the site with Dr. Wright, examining the artifacts, paying respects to the ancestors whose remains had been disturbed. Thank you, he said to Elena when he was finished, for doing this the right way, for treating our ancestors with dignity. It's their land too, it always was. Daniel studied her for a moment. Your grandmother made a choice 60 years ago. She kept this secret because she was afraid of what would happen if she told the truth. You've made a different choice, he held out his hand. I hope this is the beginning of something good, for your family and for mine. Elena shook his hand. I hope so too. 6 weeks later, 6:34 p.m. That evening, Elena sat on the porch with Caroline Grace, watching the sun set over Harmony Fields. The archaeological team had set up camp on the east hillside. Volunteers from town were still cleaning up from the night's chaos. Grace and Linda were inside making dinner and arguing about something trivial. and Elena was finally truly at peace. She looked down at her daughter, now 2 months old, watching the world with eyes that were starting to show hints of the golden brown that had marked every Carter woman for generations. "This is your home," Elena whispered. "This farm, this land, these people, all of it is yours." Caroline Grace reached up and grabbed her mother's finger, holding tight. "I'm going to tell you everything," Elena continued. "About your great-grandmother Maggie, who never stopped believing I'd come home. About your grandmother Caroline, who loved me so much that leaving seemed like the only way to protect me. About all the people who helped us get here, Grace and Linda and Earl and Thomas and Harold, and everyone who believed in us when we had nothing." The baby made a sound that might have been agreement. "And I'm going to tell you about the night I almost lost everything. About the man who tried to destroy us and the community that saved us. About how sometimes being brave means asking for help and letting people love you." She kissed her daughter's forehead. "You come from strong women, Caroline Grace. Women who survived and fought and never gave up. That strength is in you. It always will be." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and purple. The apple trees rustled in the evening breeze. And somewhere in the distance, an owl called its greeting to the coming night. Elena Carter, once a lost girl with no one and nothing, sat on the porch of her grandmother's farmhouse holding her daughter, surrounded by the family she'd found along the way. She was home. She was finally home. 1 year later, 6:47 a.m. Elena woke to the sound of her daughter laughing. It was the best sound in the world. Better than the birds singing outside her window. Better than the wind through the apple trees. Better than anything she'd ever heard in 22 years of silence and loneliness. She found Caroline Grace in the living room with Grace Sullivan, who had become a permanent fixture in their lives over the past year. The baby was sitting up on her own now, reaching for a stuffed bear, giggling every time Grace made it dance. "Someone's in a good mood," Elena said, leaning against the doorframe. "Someone woke up at 5 a.m. demanding entertainment." Grace handed the bear to Caroline, who immediately stuffed its ear into her mouth. "I hope you don't mind. I heard her crying and figured you could use the sleep." "I don't mind. I never mind." A year ago, Elena would have panicked waking up to an empty bassinet. A year ago, she would have assumed the worst, would have felt that familiar terror of losing everything she'd fought for. But a year had changed everything. "What's on the agenda today, Muck?" Grace asked. "Dr. Wright's team is finishing their excavation. There's a ceremony this afternoon to transfer the artifacts to the Cherokee Nation representatives." Elena paused. "And Harold called. He says there's news about Richard Donnelly's sentencing." Grace's expression darkened. "When the verdict comes in at noon." 1 year later, 11:45 a.m., the courtroom in Knoxville was packed. Elena sat in the front row with Caroline Grace on her lap, surrounded by people who had become her family over the past year. Grace and Linda Sullivan. Earl Thompson, the scar on his forehead now faded to a thin white line. Harold Bennett. Looking older but still sharp, Thomas Reed finally fully recovered from his injuries. And dozens of others. Community members from Sweetwater. Other victims of Richard Donnelly's schemes who had come forward after Elena's story became public. Journalists covering what had become one of the biggest fraud cases in Tennessee history. Richard Donnelly sat at the defendant's table looking nothing like the confident businessman who had threatened Elena a year ago. Prison had aged him. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His arrogant smile had disappeared entirely. The judge entered. Everyone rose. "In the matter of United States versus Richard Allen Donnelly," the judge began, "the defendant has been found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, witness tampering, assault with a deadly weapon." Elena held Caroline Grace tighter, taking into account the severity of these crimes. The number of victims and the defendant's complete lack of remorse, this court sentences Richard Allen Donnelly to 47 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for a minimum of 30 years. 47 years. Elena closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears were streaming down her face. It was over. It was really finally over. Richard Donnelly would die in prison. He would never threaten her again. Never threaten Caroline Grace. Never destroy another family the way he'd tried to destroy hers. Grace squeezed her hand. "It's done," she whispered. "You won." But Elena didn't feel like she'd won. She felt like she'd survived. And sometimes, surviving was enough. 1 year later, 2:30 p.m., the ceremony at Harmony Fields was simple but profound. Dr. Wright's team had spent a year carefully excavating the burial site, documenting everything, treating the remains and artifacts with the respect they deserved. Now, surrounded by representatives from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, community members, and the media, they were formally transferring everything to the tribe. Daniel Wolfe stood at the edge of the excavation site, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. For 1,000 years, our ancestors lived on this land. They were born here, raised their children here, died here, and then they were forgotten, buried not just in the earth, but in history. He turned to look at Elena, who stood holding Caroline Grace, tears in her eyes. Today, they are remembered again, thanks to the courage and integrity of Elena Carter, who could have hidden this discovery for her own profit, but instead chose to share it with the world. The crowd applauded. Elena felt her face flush. "This is not just a victory for the Cherokee people," Daniel continued. "This is a victory for everyone who believes that history matters, that the truth matters, that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is always worth it." He walked over to Elena and held out his hand. "On behalf of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, I want to thank you. Your grandmother kept this secret to protect her family. You've shared it to honor ours. That takes a different kind of courage." Elena shook his hand to move to speak. "We'd like to propose a partnership," Daniel said. "The tribe wants to establish an educational center here on your property, a place where people can come to learn about the history of this land, about the people who lived here before any of us. We'd pay for the construction staff, the facility handle, all the logistics. But we'd like your blessing and your involvement." Elena looked at Caroline Grace, who was watching Daniel with wide, curious eyes. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that very much." 1 year later, 5:15 p.m., after the ceremony, after the crowds had dispersed and the media had packed up their cameras, Elena walked alone to the small cemetery on the hill behind the farmhouse. 3 graves now. James Carter, her grandfather. Margaret Carter, her grandmother. And Caroline Marie Carter, her mother, whose ashes had been scattered years ago, but who now had a memorial stone marking her place in the family plot. Elena sat down between the graves, Caroline Kurtzline Grace in her arms. "I wish you could see her," she said to the stones. "I wish you could see how beautiful she is, how strong." She'd made this pilgrimage every week for the past year. Sometimes to cry, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit in silence with the only family she'd never had the chance to know. "The sentencing was today, Hans," she continued. "Richard Donnelly got 47 years. He'll never hurt anyone again." A breeze rustled through the grass. Elena chose to believe it was a response. "And Dr. Wright's team finished the excavation. We're partnering with the Cherokee Nation to build an educational center. Daniel says it could become one of the most important historical sites in Tennessee." She paused, looking down at Caroline Grace, who had fallen asleep in her arms. "I named her after both of you. Caroline for my mother. Grace for the woman who saved my life when I had nothing. I want her to know she comes from strong women. Women who survived." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm going to tell her everything, about you, Grandma Maggie, and how you never stopped believing I'd come home. About you, Mom, and how you loved me so much that leaving seemed like the only way to protect me." She touched her mother's memorial stone gently. "I understand now. I didn't for a long time. I was angry. I thought you abandoned me because I wasn't good enough, wasn't worth keeping. But I understand now. Your mind was broken, but your love wasn't. You did the only thing you knew how to do." Elena wiped her eyes. "I forgive you, both of you, for everything you couldn't do and everything you tried to do. I forgive you, and I love you, and I'm going to make sure Caroline Grace knows how much you would have loved her too." She sat there until the sun began to set, holding her daughter, talking to her mother and grandmother about all the things that had happened and all the things that were yet to come, and when she finally stood up to leave, she felt lighter than she had in years. 1 year later, 8:22 p.m., Elena was putting Caroline Grace to bed when her phone rang, an Oregon number, one she recognized. She answered. "Hello, Elena Carter," a woman's voice. "Professional? Familiar?" "This is Margaret Chen from Oregon Child Protective Services. We spoke about a year ago regarding Patricia Patterson." Elena's stomach tightened. "I remember." "Shit." "I wanted to let you know that Patricia Patterson's trial concluded today. She was found guilty on all charges: falsifying records, conspiracy to commit fraud, criminal neglect of a minor." "What was her sentence?" 18 years, plus she's been permanently barred from working with children in any capacity in any state. Elena closed her eyes. Patricia Patterson, the woman who had stolen her childhood, who had kept her from her grandmother for 22 years, who had worked with Richard Donnelly to destroy her family's legacy. "Is it wrong that I don't feel satisfied?" Elena asked quietly. 18 years seems like nothing compared to what she took from me. It's not wrong. Justice isn't the same as healing. Margaret Chen paused. But there's something else I wanted to tell you. Something that might help. What? During her trial, Patricia Patterson made a statement. She asked me to pass it along to you. I don't want to hear anything she has to say. I understand, but I think you should hear this. Margaret Chen took a breath. She said, tell Elena I was wrong. About her grandmother, about everything. I spent 30 years hating a woman who didn't deserve it, and I destroyed a child who never did anything to me. I can't undo what I did, but I want her to know I'm sorry, not because I want forgiveness, because she deserves to hear the truth. Elena was silent for a long moment. She admitted she was wrong. She admitted everything. That's part of why her sentence was relatively light. Full cooperation, full confession. Does that change anything? That's up to you. Elena thought about it. Thought about Patricia Patterson sitting in a prison cell knowing she had destroyed lives for no good reason. Thought about the anger she'd carried for so long, the hatred that had burned in her chest every time she remembered the woman's cold smile. It doesn't change what she did, Elena said finally. But maybe it changes how I carry it. That's probably the healthiest response I could hope for. Margaret Chen's voice warmed slightly. Take care of yourself, Elena, and take care of that beautiful daughter of yours. I will. Elena hung up and looked at Caroline Grace sleeping peacefully in her crib. 2 people who had tried to destroy her were now in prison. The farm was thriving. The archaeological discovery was being handled with dignity and respect. She had family, friends, community. She had everything she'd ever wanted. And yet, something was still missing. Something she couldn't quite name. 2 years later. 10:30 a.m. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Elena was sorting through the mail when she saw the return address. Nashville, Tennessee. A law firm she didn't recognize. She opened it with trembling hands. Dear Ms. Carter, the letter began. We are writing to inform you of a matter regarding your late mother, Caroline Marie Carter. Our firm recently came into possession of documents that may be of interest to you. Elena read on, her heart pounding faster with every sentence. Enclosed, please find a letter written by Caroline Carter in 2002, 1 year before your birth. This letter was held in trust by our firm with instructions to deliver it to Caroline's daughter on her 21st birthday. Due to your status as a ward of the state with no known address, delivery was not possible until recently. Elena reached into the envelope and pulled out a smaller envelope yellowed with age. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she recognized from her mother's note in the wooden chest. Her hands shook so badly she could barely open it. My dearest Elena, the letter began, if you're reading this, then you've found your way back to me, or at least to the pieces of me that remain. I'm writing this on a good day. The doctors say I have more good days now with the new medication. They say I might be able to have a normal life, a family, a future. But I don't trust the good days anymore. I've had too many bad ones. So I'm writing this now while I can to tell you things I might not be able to say later. I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love the idea of you, the possibility of you, the dream of holding you in my arms and watching you grow. But I'm scared, Elena. I'm scared of what my mind does to me. I'm scared of the voices that tell me terrible things. I'm scared that one day I'll wake up and not know who you are, or worse, believe you're something you're not. If that day comes, if I do something unforgivable, I want you to know the truth. You were wanted. You were loved. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Whatever I become, whatever I do, please remember me like this. Remember me on a good day writing to my daughter, hoping she'll forgive me for whatever comes next. Your grandmother will take care of you. She's the strongest woman I know. She'll give you everything I can't. Be brave, Elena. Be strong. Be everything I couldn't be. And know that somewhere in whatever's left of me, I will always, always love you. Forever yours. Mom. Elena was sobbing so hard she couldn't see. Her mother had written this before she was born, before the illness had taken over completely, before the voices had convinced her that leaving was the only way to protect her daughter. Caroline Carter had loved her, had wanted her, had hoped for a future together even knowing it might never come, and she'd made sure Elena would know the truth even if it took 22 years to reach her. 2 years later. 3:45 p.m. Grace found Elena on the porch, the letter still in her hands, her face swollen from crying. What is it? What happened? Elena handed her the letter. Grace read it slowly, her expression shifting from concern to wonder to grief. "Oh, Elena. She loved me." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "She really loved me. I always hoped, but I never knew for sure." "Now you know." "I wasted so many years being angry at her, thinking she abandoned me because I wasn't enough. And the whole time she was sick and scared and trying to protect me the only way she knew how." Grace sat down beside her and took her hand. "You didn't waste anything. You survived. And now you're here raising your daughter, honoring your mother's memory. That's not waste. That's redemption." Elena looked out at the farm. The orchards were in full bloom, a carpet of white and pink stretching toward the hills. The barn stood strong and solid, rebuilt by the community that had embraced her. And in the distance she could see the construction beginning on the Cherokee Nation's educational center. "I want to add something to her memorial," Elena said suddenly. "What?" "A quote from this letter, the part about being wanted and loved." She met Grace's eyes. "I want everyone who visits that cemetery to know the truth about Caroline Carter. Not the woman who left her baby at a church. The woman who loved her daughter so much, it broke her heart." "I think that's a beautiful idea." Elena stood up suddenly, filled with purpose. "And I want to do something else. Something bigger." "What?" "The trust fund Grandma Maggie left me. There's still money in it. I want to use it to create a scholarship for foster kids aging out of the system. Help them go to college, get job training, find their footing in the world." "Elena, that's... I know what it's like to have nothing and no one. I know what it feels like to turn 19 and suddenly be told you're not anyone's responsibility anymore." Her voice hardened. "No one should have to face that alone. Not if I can help it." Grace smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Maggie would be so proud of you." "I hope so. I really hope so." 3 years later, 7:15 a.m. Caroline Grace. Carter took her first steps at 14 months old. She took them in the apple orchard surrounded by trees that had fed her family for 100 years. Elena was there to catch her when she stumbled to cheer, when she found her balance to cry, when she realized what this moment meant. Her daughter was walking, growing, becoming her own person, and Elena had been there for every single second of it. "Mama," Caroline Grace said, reaching for her, "I'm a destiny Rinori." One of her first words along with up and no and more. "I'm here, baby." Elena scooped her up and held her close. "I'm always here." They walked through the orchard together, Elena pointing out birds and butterflies, Caroline Grace babbling in response. The morning sun filtered through the branches, dappling them both in light and shadow. "This is all yours someday," Elena said. "The farm, the orchards, the legacy. Your great-great-grandfather planted these trees. Your great-grandmother tended them her whole life. And now they're ours." Caroline Grace grabbed an apple blossom and tried to eat it. Elena laughed and gently took it away. "Not that part. That part is for the bees." 3 years later, 2:30 p.m. The Caroline Carter Scholarship Fund launched that spring. Elena stood at the podium in the Sweetwater Community Center surrounded by local officials, child welfare advocates, and journalists who had followed her story for the past 3 years. 3 years ago, I aged out of the foster care system with $47 in my pocket and a baby on the way," she said. "I had no family, no support, no idea where I was going or what I was going to do." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "But I had something that changed everything. A key, a photograph, a grandmother I'd never met who had spent 22 years trying to find me." Her voice cracked slightly. "Not everyone has that. Most foster kids age out with nothing but the clothes on their backs in a system that suddenly doesn't care what happens to them. They're told they're adults now, that they should be able to take care of themselves, that society has done enough. That's wrong, and I want to change it." She held up a check, the first disbursement from the scholarship fund. "This is for a young woman named Destiny Williams. She's 18 years old, aging out of the system in 3 months, and she's been accepted to the University of Tennessee, but she had no way to pay for it." Destiny stood up in the front row, tears streaming down her face. "This scholarship will cover her tuition, her books, and her living expenses for 4 years, and when she graduates, she won't owe anyone a single penny." The crowd erupted in applause. Elena walked down from the podium and handed Destiny the check. "This isn't charity," Elena said quietly. "This is what you deserve. What every kid in that system deserves. A chance." Destiny hugged her so hard Elena couldn't breathe. "Thank you," Destiny whispered. "Thank you so much." Don't thank me, just pay it forward. Someday when you're in a position to help someone else do it. That's all I ask. 3 years later, 6:00 p.m. That evening, Elena hosted a dinner at Harmony Fields for everyone who had helped her over the past 3 years. The farmhouse, once dusty and abandoned, was now warm and full of life. Grace and Linda Sullivan were in the kitchen arguing over the best way to make biscuits. Earl Thompson and Thomas Reed sat on the porch trading stories about Maggie Carter. Harold Bennett was showing Caroline Grace how to play checkers, though she was more interested in eating the pieces than moving them. And Elena stood in the doorway, watching it all, feeling something she'd never felt before. Contentment. Not just happiness, not just relief. Deep abiding contentment. The kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. What are you thinking about? She turned to find Daniel Wolfe standing beside her. He'd become a regular visitor over the past year as the educational center took shape and the partnership between Harmony Fields and the Cherokee Nation deepened. I'm thinking about how different my life is now compared to 3 years ago. Different good? Different beyond anything I could have imagined. Elena smiled. 3 years ago, I was pregnant and homeless, running from a woman who wanted to destroy me. Now I have a home, a daughter, a community. I have purpose. You've built something remarkable here, Elena. The scholarship fund, the educational center, the example you've set for other foster kids. You've turned your pain into something that helps people. That's all I ever wanted, to make sure no one else has to go through what I went through. Daniel nodded slowly. There's something I wanted to ask you. The Tribal Council has been talking about expanding the educational center, adding a residential component for at-risk youth, a place where they can come to learn about nature, about history, about themselves. Elena's interest sharpened. What kind of residential component? A summer camp, essentially, but specifically for kids in foster care. Give them a chance to experience something different, to connect with the land, with community, with their own potential. Here at Harmony Fields. If you're willing, we'd handle all the logistics, all the funding, but we'd want you involved, as a role model, as proof that kids from the system can build something meaningful. Elena thought about it. Thought about the scared, pregnant teenager she'd been 3 years ago. Thought about all the foster kids she'd known over the years, the ones who never got a chance, who aged out and disappeared into poverty and struggle and despair. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. 5 years later, 9:00 a.m. The Harmony Fields Youth Center opened on a sunny morning in June. Elena stood at the entrance, Caroline Grace beside her watching as the first busload of foster children arrived. 12 kids ages 10 to 16 from across Tennessee. They stepped off the bus looking uncertain, skeptical, the way foster kids always looked when they arrived somewhere new. Elena knew that look. She'd worn it herself for 22 years. Welcome to Harmony Fields, she said, stepping forward. My name is Elena Carter, and I used to be exactly where you are now. The kids looked at her with varying degrees of disbelief. I know what you're thinking. Another adult who says they understand but doesn't. Another program that promises to change your life but won't. Elena smiled. I get it. I thought the same thing every time someone tried to help me. She gestured at the farm behind her. The orchards in full bloom. The rebuilt barn. The educational center with its exhibits about Cherokee history. The farmhouse where she'd raised her daughter. 3 years ago, this place was abandoned and falling apart. I was homeless, pregnant, and running from people who wanted to destroy me. And now she spread her arms wide. Now this is home. My home, and for the next 2 weeks, it's yours too. A girl in the front, maybe 15, crossed her arms. What's the catch? No catch. You don't have to do anything except show up. Learn if you want, participate if you want, or just enjoy being somewhere that nobody's going to send you away from. Elena's voice softened. I know how rare that is. Somewhere you can just exist without wondering when the other shoe is going to drop. The girl's expression shifted slightly, not convinced, but listening. My daughter Caroline is going to show you around, Elena continued. She's 5, so she might talk your ear off about butterflies and apple trees. But she's the best tour guide we've got. Caroline Grace stepped forward, her dark hair bouncing, her golden brown eyes bright with excitement. Who wants to see the horses first? She asked. The kid's skepticism cracked just a little. Horses had that effect. Follow me, Caroline said, and started toward the barn. The kids followed, all except the skeptical girl who hung back. What's your name? Elena asked. Destiny. Elena's heart clenched. The same name as the first scholarship recipient. Why'd you stay behind? Destiny shrugged. I wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. You said you used to be like us. Foster kid, no family, nobody who cared. Destiny's voice was hard challenging. But you obviously got lucky. You found out you had a rich grandmother. You inherited this place. That's not the same as being like us. Elena was quiet for a moment. You're right, she said finally. I did get lucky. I found out I had family when I thought I had nobody. I inherited a farm when I thought I was going to be homeless. So why do you pretend? I'm not pretending. I'm telling you that luck isn't the whole story. Elena met the girl's eyes. I found out about this farm 3 days before I was supposed to age out. I was 7 months pregnant, I had $47, and the woman who ran my group home was actively trying to destroy me. Destiny's expression flickered. I traveled 1,200 miles on a Greyhound bus alone, not knowing if I'd find anything at the end. When I got here, a criminal was trying to steal my inheritance. He had lawyers' money connections. I had nothing but a key and a photograph. How did you win? I didn't win alone. I found people who believed in me, who helped me, who fought alongside me. Elena put a hand on Destiny's shoulder. That's what I want you to learn here. Not that you're going to get lucky and find a rich grandmother, but that you don't have to face everything alone. That there are people who will help you if you let them. Destiny was quiet for a long moment. I've heard that before from a lot of adults who didn't mean it. I know, and I can't promise you anything except this. Elena gestured at the farm at the youth center, at everything she'd built. I'm still here. 5 years later, I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. Something shifted in Destiny's eyes. Not trust exactly, but the beginning of possibility. Okay, she said. I'll give it a chance. That's all I ask. 5 years later, 7:30 p.m. That evening, Elena sat on the porch with Caroline Grace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and orange and purple. The foster kids were in the bunkhouse, supervised by staff from the Cherokee Nation Educational Program. The farm was quiet except for the sounds of evening crickets chirping, owls calling, the distant laughter of children who weren't used to having space to play. Mama? Caroline Grace leaned against her shoulder. Yes, baby. Was I named after someone? Elena smiled. They'd had this conversation before, but Caroline liked hearing the story. You were named after 2 people. Caroline for your grandmother, my mama, who loved me very much but was too sick to take care of me, and Grace for the woman who helped me find my way home when I had nothing. Tell me about Grandmother Caroline. She was beautiful and smart and had a smile that could light up a room, but her brain worked differently than other people's brains. It made her hear things that weren't there, believe things that weren't true. And one day when I was very little, she got so scared of hurting me that she left me somewhere safe and never came back. That's sad. It is sad, but you know what's not sad. What? She left me with a letter. And in that letter, she told me she loved me more than anything in the world, that I was wanted, that I was the best thing that ever happened to her. Elena hugged her daughter close. And now I get to pass that love on to you. So even though I never got to know my mama, she's still here, in you, in me, in everything we've built. Caroline Grace was quiet for a moment, processing this the way 5-year-olds do. I think she would like the horses, she said finally. Elena laughed through sudden tears. I think she would too, baby. I think she would too. 5 years later, 11:58 p.m. After Caroline Grace was asleep, Elena walked out to the cemetery one last time. The moon was full, casting silver light across the gravestones. She knelt between her grandmother's grave and her mother's memorial, the grass cool beneath her knees. I wish you could see what this place has become, she said softly. The youth center is full of kids who remind me of who I used to be. Scared, angry, convinced nobody cares about them. She touched her mother's memorial stone. I'm going to prove them wrong. The same way you proved me wrong, Grandma Maggie. The same way you tried to prove me wrong, Mom, even when your mind wouldn't let you. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm not angry anymore. At either of you. At Mrs. Patterson. At Richard Donnelly. At the system that failed me for 22 years. I spent so long carrying that anger, letting it define me, but I don't need it anymore. She stood up, brushing grass from her knees. I have everything I ever wanted now. A home, a family, a purpose. And I have you, both of you, not in person, but in everything I do, everything I build, everything I pass on to Caroline Grace. The wind rustled through the apple trees. Elena chose to believe it was an answer. I love you, she whispered. I'll always love you. And I'll make sure the world remembers you. Not as a woman who lost her granddaughter, not as a woman whose illness made her leave her child, but as Carter women, strong, brave, unbreakable. She walked back to the farmhouse, the moon lighting her path. Behind her, the grave stood silent and peaceful under the Tennessee sky. And in the morning, Elena would wake up to her daughter's laughter and start another day of building the legacy her grandmother had dreamed of and her mother had never gotten to see. 1 year later, 10:30 a.m., the anniversary celebration brought everyone together. 6 years since Elena had arrived at Harmony Fields with nothing but a key and a photograph. 6 years since she'd fought for her inheritance and won. 6 years since Caroline Grace had been born in the small hospital in Monroe County. The farm had never looked better. The orchards were thriving, producing enough apples to supply farmers markets across East Tennessee. The youth center had hosted over 200 foster children, many of whom had gone on to college or trade programs, with help from the Caroline Carter Scholarship Fund. The educational center had become one of the most visited historical sites in the region, and Elena, now 28 years old, stood at the center of it all, holding her daughter's hand, surrounded by the families she'd found along the way. Grace Sullivan was there, retired now from nursing, but still living in Sweetwater, still showing up every morning to help with breakfast. Linda and her husband and their 4 kids who treated Caroline Grace like a cousin. Earl Thompson and Thomas Reed, both getting older, but still sharp, still full of stories about Maggie Carter. Harold Bennett, 90 now, and frail but refusing to miss a single celebration. Daniel Wolfe and representatives from the Cherokee Nation. Destiny, the skeptical girl from the first summer program, now enrolled at the University of Tennessee on a full scholarship, and dozens of others, community members, former foster kids, people whose lives had intersected with Elena's over the past 6 years, creating a web of connection that grew stronger every day. "Speech," someone called out. "Speech, speech?" Elena laughed and held up her hands. Okay, but keep it short. We've got cake waiting." The crowd settled, everyone watching her expectantly. 6 years ago, I walked onto this property for the first time. I was 19, 7 months pregnant, and I had no idea if I was going to find answers or just more questions. She looked around at the faces surrounding her. I found both. I found out who my family was and why they couldn't be there for me. I found out about a criminal conspiracy that had stolen 22 years of my life. And I found out that there were people in this world willing to help a stranger just because it was the right thing to do. Her voice thickened with emotion. I used to believe I was alone, that I'd always be alone, that some people just weren't meant to have families or homes or people who cared about them. She squeezed Caroline Grace's hand. I was wrong. So wrong. And I'm grateful every single day that I had the courage to find out. "What changed?" someone asked. "What made you keep going when everything seemed impossible?" Elena thought about it. "I think it was the key," she said finally. "That old brass key my grandmother left in my file. It wasn't just a key to a door. It was proof that someone out there believed I'd find my way home, that even when I didn't believe in myself, someone else did." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the key. Still brass, still old, still worn smooth by generations of Carter hands. "I keep this with me always, as a reminder, that I come from people who never gave up, and that I don't have to either." She held up the key so everyone could see it. This key opened more than just a farmhouse door. It opened a new life, a new family, a new purpose, and today I want to pass it on. She turned to Caroline Grace, who was watching her with those golden brown Carter eyes. "This key belongs to you now, baby. It's your heritage, your legacy, and someday you'll pass it on to your children and they'll pass it on to theirs. And as long as there's a Carter woman holding this key, Harmony Fields will never be lost again." Caroline Grace took the key, carefully holding it like the treasure it was. "Thank you, Mama." "You're welcome, baby. Now let's go get some cake." The crowd laughed and dispersed toward the dessert table. But Elena stayed where she was for a moment, watching her daughter run off with the other children, the brass key clutched in her small hand. 6 years ago, she'd been nobody from nowhere. A foster kid aging out of the system with nothing but a pregnant belly and $47. Now she was Elena Carter, mother, farmer, philanthropist, builder of something that would outlast her. And she'd done it all because an old woman in Tennessee had never stopped believing her granddaughter would find her way home. Grace came to stand beside her. "You okay?" "More than okay." Elena smiled, watching Caroline Grace disappear into a crowd of laughing children. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Maggie would be proud of you." "I know, that's the best part." Elena turned to look at the farmhouse, the orchards, the rolling hills that had belonged to her family for 100 years. "I finally know. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling the weight of the past 6 years settle into something manageable, something she could carry. "Come on," she said to Grace. "Let's go celebrate." They walked toward the farmhouse together, toward the laughter and music and community that Elena had built from nothing. And as she crossed the threshold of the home her grandmother had left her, Elena Carter knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was not a mistake that should have been erased. She was not a number in a file. She was a Carter woman, strong, brave, unbreakable, and this was her legacy. This was her home, and no one would ever take it from her again.